She lies prone on the cave floor, her breathing ragged. The weight of the struggle presses on her, not letting go. The beast recoils, its face explodes with splashes of dark ichor as the final blow finally hits the target. The animal falls, and in the stone remains a simple dagger embedded without any pomp. Its magical aura dissipates and vanishes without a trace. She stands among the debris and brushes off disappointment over the trophies, while her companions argue over the meager loot and the road ahead. They retreat into the shadows of the tunnel, their voices muffled, echoing complaints about the futility of the height. Hours drag on in the oppressive silence of the depths, and the cave floor remains undisturbed. Suddenly the ground shakes, and beneath the surface a new terrifying presence begins to stir. From the dark depths of the dungeon, a viscous substance suddenly bursts from the walls and floor, a fountain announcing the abnormal birth of a labyrinthine beast. When the mass closes into one, it becomes clear. These creatures do not grow or learn. They only appear without memory, without past experience, and replace those who have fallen. Although it mimics the form of a living being, there is no real life in it. It exists only as an empty construct, laid out by the design of the dungeon. The Minotaur stands on the shaky floor, proof of the rule that these monsters do not evolve and do not inherit traits from their predecessors. Its eyes snap open sharply in its gaze, a cold, predatory mind, entirely artificial. In the boss room, Sazard and Labyrinth, another creature successfully escaped and took its place. It rises to its full, enormous height, gripping heavy axes with a strength born of pure, blind instinct. The creature surveys its domain, focuses its breathing, restrains a trembling, primal exhale, and prepares to defend the level. Slipped out of the viscous mud, its huge figure tore through the liquid barrier until it fully appeared inside the labyrinth. The beast stood tall, heavy axes widely spread, as it burst out with a guttural, primal roar that echoed through the stone corridors. Its jaw dropped, revealing rows of serrated and human-like teeth as it prepared to intimidate. With a sharp, brutal motion, it slammed its weapons into the ground. The stone floor shattered, and debris scattered in all directions. The beast stood among the ruins it had created, a silent guardian waiting for the center to prey. Its eyes narrowed, a cold predator's gleam flashed as it fixed its gaze on a distant movement. From the shadows, the beast watched a solitary figure approaching the entrance. Its gaze did not blink, deadly and merciless. The priestess stepped forward, already holding her blade ready, unaware that the dark, twisted hollow had already marked her arrival. She froze in place, her eyes widened as she realized the creature looming before her was the fearsome level 10 boss, the Minotaur. The holographic interface blinked and reappeared, showing her documents. Elena, level 16, Class D. She tensely braced against the shadow looming from the beast. The weight of the monster's presence pressed her to the ground. Its gigantic body and bare, palpable rage forced her to face the terrible reality of this encounter. Trying to calm her wildly beating heart, she recalled the harsh training she had meticulously done. Clenching the restorative medicine in her hand, she had brought it precisely for this moment. The Minotaur loomed, its gaze fixed on her as she calculated, to defeat this guardian alone and she would immediately earn a promotion to Class C. Her grip on the weapon tightened, and hope became desperate. This victory was meant to restore her father's strength and bring a smile back to her mother's eyes. She clenched the talisman, whispering a fervent prayer to the earth goddess for protection, even as the beast burst out with a loud, primal roar. With a sharp, wildly violent movement, the Minotaur leapt into the air and the heavy axe thundered down on her. The strike shattered the ground beneath her feet, leaving only splinters. She barely dodged the deadly blow. The earth beneath her feet cracked into jagged fragments as the beast's weapon struck the stone. With a desperate scream, she sharply jumped back, her gaze glued to the giant figure, as it prepared to unleash another devastating strike. It lunged forward, the axe sliced through the air, but she danced just slightly aside, forcing the monster to hit the cave wall instead. The impact scattered debris in all directions, but she did not look away. She understood that the predictable movements of this brutal force were its main weakness. Trembling from memories of training, she calculated the rhythm of its attack and decided to disarm it, but only in a way that would secure victory. Then she unleashed a fierce battle cry that burst like a thunderous crash. She strikes accurately, cutting the monster's grip from its weapon. A wave of triumph washes over her until the axes clang loudly against the ground. The beast convulses spasmodically from shock, but she presses on and delivers the final decisive blow, so much so that it is thrown back and staggers. Exhaustion finally catches up with her and she collapses onto the cave floor, gasping for air, while the defeated giant looms in the distance. She watches in horror as the beast releases a deafening, primal roar. Its gigantic form jerks forward, filled with a new, even more terrifying power. The memory of the warning echoes in her mind. The beast is already preparing a furious attack, a devastating maneuver that burns all its strength and leaves its victim helpless. She frantically checks her supplies, realizing one mistake now could mean death, so she must keep her health potions ready for the coming onslaught. The monster releases a shockwave of pure power. The ground trembles wildly, and its breath tears through the chamber. She desperately raises a flickering barrier of light, and her body trembles under incredible pressure as she holds the defense with all her might. The monster lunges forward with unstoppable momentum. Its heavy axe cuts through the air to strike the ground where she stood just a moment ago. At the moment she barely dodges the blow, realization hits her. The boss is trapped within these walls, and knowing when to retreat is the only chance to survive this encounter. She gasps for air, her lungs burning as the creature looms over her, forcing her to convulsively pull back to escape the relentless, oppressive chase. The priestess confessor slides across the cold floor. Her breathing is ragged as the monster, like a bruiser, looms over her. Heavy footsteps echo with each deliberate approach. Strikes the stone walls with primal fury, the blow shatters magical runes and makes them crackle and flare with unstable energy, as the creature relentlessly continues the attack. With a formidable strike, the Minotaur smashes the surrounding masonry. Debris flies as he stomps forward to trap his prey. The beast freezes, nostrils flaring as it inhales and rips ragged, heavy breaths from its chest, its gaze fixed on the fallen woman. She struggles to rise from the ground, her body trembling with wild exhaustion after the clash. The creature's face twists with mad rage. Teeth bared, it prepares to deliver the final, devastating blow. In a desperate attempt to escape, she reaches out and grabs a nearby Saganets, pulls him close, and retreats into the dark corridor. She sinks against the wall, crying from pain and defeat. Clutching the package, and the weight of everything that has happened to her finally crushes her. She settled on the cold stone, and her will was breaking as she begged the earth goddess for one last surge of strength to overcome the horror that was approaching. The chamber walls trembled with fierce crackling light, responding to her desperate prayer, while the heavy blows of the pursuer echoed ever closer. A roar tore through the air. The beast lunged forward, its massive body soaked with the same unstable, hissing energy that now devoured the surrounding architecture. She froze in terror as the creature tore through the ruined defenses, and with a sickening heartbeat realized the boss room guardian had already crossed the threshold. The Minotaur closed the distance. He heavily, with hoarse breathing, filled the cramped space, preparing to strike with all his might and no chance of mercy. In the blur of movement, the monster snatched her, tossing her into the air. A helpless figure hung above the ground as she stared into the abyss of its maw. Wide open, roaring, jagged. The blow was merciless. A slapping, disgusting crash, and she was shattered, thrown hard against the unyielding floor. When the dust settled, the air still hissed with residual force, and only the silence of the final, devastating defeat remained. She lies shattered on the ground, her body radiating a faint, fading warmth as life force escapes from her. Around her, the air begins to hiss and steam, the remnants of her divine energy, wildly reacting to the trauma. With a heavy, dull thud, the beast presses her to the ground with its massive, stone-like hand, choking out the last sparks of resistance. The pressure builds and the earth and bones crunch, bending, while that vile sound echoes throughout the entire room. A single drop of moisture falls from the creature's grip, followed by the last, devastating weight of its palm. Beneath them, the earth tears and cracks from colossal force, unable to withstand the relentless pressure of the creature. Rising to its full, terrifying height, the monster shatters the silence with a deafening roar that makes the very foundations of the ruins tremble. In its chest burns an insatiable, oceanic thirst. It is not evil that drives this beast, it is primal, all-consuming hunger. The beast roars into the void, its voice, a hoarse command, more power and more enemies to be slaughtered. She releases her craving for power with a scream, a desperate plea that shatters the silence of the ruins. Among the ruins lies a fallen priestess, broken, and her blood slowly trickles onto the cold, merciless stone. On the ground, a mystical seal ignites, responding to the call of ancient cold promises. The desire is heard and will be fulfilled. A blinding flash of energy bursts outward, enveloping the creature in a radiant divine halo, from which even the air trembles. The light begins to devour space, dissolving the remnants of the battlefield into complete oblivion. Flesh and stone are equally scorched by the force of manifestation. They twist under the weight of divine intervention. The sacred relic pulses with rhythmic thunder, showing this light is a blessing meant only for the righteous, yet already twisted by the hunger of the beast. He felt the divine grace pierce him like a wave of power that simultaneously healed bodily wounds and erased the mental burden of past clashes, forging the body with super-strong force. The transformation lasted under rhythmic buzzing, a solemn growth that shook the very foundations of the room while the ground beneath his feet trembled. His form blurred, muscles convulsed in waves and hardened under the influence of stolen power, casting a massive shadow on the stone walls. He shuddered from the breath, his chest gasped for air in bursts, and he twitched his fingers, testing the new density of his own grip with primal, hungry focus. Insatiable greed consumed his thoughts, pouring out in a desperate, loud echoing scream. More power, more might, and more clashes. Elsewhere, the call to battle echoed, and armed warriors in armor and mages, who were already ready to answer the call, gathered around it. The gray-haired scholar, illuminated by the trembling light of a candle, tore his gaze away from his ancient texts and narrowed his eyes, sensing the arrival of new enemies. Obsession deepened. It grew towards a single goal: to crush even stronger opponents, and his determination hardened, turning into one single, cruel objective. He directs his gaze forward, maintaining a firm, unshakable mood. His sharp features are lit by cold, reflected light as he contemplates the wonder before him. Somewhere deep on the 10th floor of Sazern Labyrinth, a legend begins to sprout. The entity standing in the shadows goes against the natural order, proving that beasts can evolve and grow beyond their primal instincts. It looks back with primal, indomitable eyes, a force so unpredictable and powerful that it earns a title whispered with fear: the King of the Labyrinth. Labyrinths are ancient underground mysteries that have long captivated the human spirit. These mysterious spaces are scattered across the world and serve as the foundation of the fame and prosperity of modern civilization. As one traveler once loudly declared, these are the abodes of gods, promising colossal wealth, glory, and explosive power to those who dare to enter. In those depths, it is whispered, any desire can be fulfilled if you have the strength to step forward and claim what is yours. The silence of the stone corridors is shattered by a giant beast covered in fur. It slams its weapon into the ground with a crash, and the earth trembles from the impact. He breathes heavily, his eyes burning an insatiable thirst for battle. Enemies are not enough for him, he demands more to test his strength. While humanity carelessly does not suspect, inside the 10th level of Sazerd Labyrinth unfolds a catastrophe that he himself caused. The beast stands amid the ruins, a creature of pure, uncontrollable rage, born from the very bowels of the earth. He bursts through the flesh of the fallen enemy with primal fury, and the sound of tearing muscles echoes through the stone corridor. After he devours the remains, he watches as the essence of the creature dissolves into radiant orbs, leaving behind only a metallic object that clatters on the floor. Understanding finally settles. Those who die within these walls vanish without a trace, leaving behind only their earthly belongings. He breathes heavily, and irritation grows as he realizes the meager trophies of his victory cannot satisfy his insatiable hunger. Suddenly, a pack of wild beasts emerges from the shadows, and their growls challenge his dominion in the labyrinth. They all rush at him in a coordinated attack, but he meets their fury with a barrage of precise deadly strikes. As one beast tries to flank him, he sharply turns and with unexpected speed catches the creature midair with his jaws. He crushes the life of his attacker, the crunch of bone resounds, signaling the end of the skirmish as he stands amid the carnage. He madly crashed through the pack of beasts, a huge hand sweeping away resistance as creatures fell lifeless onto the stone floor. With a predatory crunch, he swallowed the remains, hunger barely abated, and the fallen enemies dissolved into shimmering coins and metal scraps. Breaking free from the slaughter, he encountered a new wave of predators that hissed and growled. Their roar echoed in the narrow corridor as he prepared for yet another brutal clash. The monster stomped deeper into the labyrinth, heavy steps marking a path of destruction, and its eyes burned with an ever-growing, restless rage. He swung the axe with desperate force, cursing the endless swarm of weaklings, and his mind was consumed by a single terrible need for greater power. Meanwhile, the lone warrior stood trapped, pressed against the cold wall, his blade held steady as a pack of beasts advanced on him. He breathed heavily, his chest heaving from exhaustion, while those fiercely growling creatures circled around, stalking for a moment of weakness. The Minotaur emerged from the shadows, its gaze fixed on the warrior for the first time, sensing a different prey. He stands amid a frenzied pack of lupin beasts, and his blade rhythmically and precisely cuts through fur and flesh. Each strike is a calculated response to the growling crowd, leaving a bloody trail with a dark ichor as he holds his position under relentless pressure. The warrior lunged forward and drove steel deep into the creature's skull while another beast grabbed his arm. He jerked back, gasping for air, movements grew heavy from exhaustion, and the rest of the predator spun around in the dim corridor. He dashed toward the final beast, blade already ready for the decisive strike, but suddenly froze. From the shadows rolled a primal, devastating weight he had to stop because he realized, in this hunt he was no longer the apex prey. The warrior drives the blade deep into the creature, and the strike echoes in the corridor as he pins the beast to the ground. He quickly pulls out a vial, swallows the red liquid to patch his wounds, and notices that these potions are necessary for survival in the depths of the labyrinth. From the shadows suddenly looms a sudden, heavy presence. He freezes in fear as he realizes he is no longer alone. His eyes widen in disbelief. In the corridor where she should not exist, a minotaur stands before him, a boss-level monster. He trembles and his thoughts wildly scatter. He realizes that against such a formidable opponent, he can no longer prevail. The two freeze in tense confrontation. The warrior cautiously shifts his weight while the beast prepares to strike. He slowly begins to retreat, not taking his eyes off the monster, as he makes his way through the narrow stone passage. The beast watches him intently, its gaze fixed on the warrior as he climbs the stairs, escaping with his last strength from a deadly clash. He retreats into the very depths of the labyrinth, his body heavy from wounds and exhaustion, while the minotaur walks the corridors behind, heavily and measuredly thudding with its steps. A few days after that encounter, the unrest passed and silence reigned in the region. Life once again surged in the suburbs of Sazerden Labyrinth, especially in the village of Mycenae, where travelers gather under the sun. The local Adventurers Guild is the heart of this affair, attracting both travelers and locals here. In the guild hall, the air is thick with chatter from visitors sharing stories and drinking. In the midst of the festival, a burly adventurer feels his way to the quest board, his irritation only growing when he notices that among the available tasks, there are no truly difficult challenges. Soon the guild president approaches him, recognizing his arrival and handing him an urgent assignment. The president explains how serious everything is. Reports have appeared that the Minotaur has been spotted wandering the corridors of the 10th floor far beyond its designated boss room. He listened attentively while the details of that incident were being laid out. Torn equipment and a metal object belonging to the Traveler Elena were found right in front of the boss's office door. The briefing lasted. Rumors were reported that some strange creature was hunting on the 10th floor, and the Grey Wolf monsters dropped their usual falling items. Hedge furrowed his brow and noticed that for the Grey Wolves, leaving prey was too irregular, because they are known as ruthless opponents. The guild president leaned forward and made it clear that for a scout of such a level, checking the presence of a Minotaur and investigating anomalies was a trivial matter. He accepted a meager cash reward, but the president cut it with a counteroffer much more valuable, a personal commission from the guild leader himself. The surrounding travelers froze in shock upon hearing this proposal. But Grind, realizing that he was indebting the president to himself, saw this as a prize far more valuable than gold. After the agreement was sealed, the team gathered to set off. The firmness of their decision thickened under the weight of the mission ahead. Among them stands the ready adventurous Charlie. Her adventurous status of Class 28C is confirmed for travel to the very depths. She watched as a traveler named Raystrand, a Class C warrior level 29, put the finishing touch on the details of his registration. The president of the guild addressed the group and confirmed, the reward for their mission is theirs to keep if they handle the reporting themselves. When the conversation turned to promotion and merits, the sorceress Charlie cut it off with a confident display of her own greatness, dismissing any doubts about her assistance. Her face darkened. A sharp, anxious smile almost formed as she pressed Paya for confirmation there are no hidden motives in this agreement. For a moment everyone was confused, but the group prepared to set out. Determination strengthened and they moved further on the road. He brushed off the awkwardness, as if her sharp temper was something you just get used to over time. She shifted focus back to the mission and questioned the guild president about the proper protocol to follow if something truly anomalous happens in the laboratory. Her gaze sharpened as she made a chilling assumption. What if the Minotaur is suddenly found wandering outside its designated boss room? She watches as the guild president considers her hypothetical scenario. On his face, professional detachment, then his expression changes to focused, measured silence. He acknowledges the weight of her words and promises to increase the payout if such an incredible disaster really occurs, effectively shifting the burden of this possible reality onto her shoulders. When the terms of their dangerous contracts were settled, the adventurers switched to hunting. They form a tracking squad to stalk the beast, laying the groundwork for a bloody and inevitable clash deep within the labyrinth. Deep in the labyrinth of Sazern, the squad reaches the boss room on the 10th floor. Raystrand, Charlia, and Paja stand ready. Their presence marks the finale of this descent. They come face to face with a giant minotaur. Its presence is oppressive and seems different than usual. The adventurer exchanges observations, noting its unusual size and distinctive features. The beast responds with a gaze of eerie confidence. The group remains puzzled why it is not afraid, even though their strength is combined. Raystrand shifts the focus to possible rewards, suggesting they are dealing with a unique monster. This noticeably increases the chance of rare item drops. The loot fueling their determination makes the group stop arguing and they begin the hunt, tearing forward in sync. They quickly coordinate the strategy. Raystrand and the warrior will distract the beast, while Padra prepares to strike with her precious arrows as soon as the creature is poisoned. Despite the plan, a lingering feeling of fear hangs over the party in the evening. The Minotaur seems different. It radiates a threatening aura that shatters their expectations. Gaia begins to channel his magic, but his face twitches with shock. The spell does not manifest as it should, leaving him defenseless. He quickly recovers from the spell failure, displaying a radiant sigil to summon a weapon from his invisible stash. Nearby, she whispers a spell, calls upon the goddess to bind the monster with thorns made of clay. The warrior strikes with all his might, but his blade does not pierce the Minotaur's skin, and he freezes in shock at the creature's unnatural endurance. She continues with a barrage of ice knives. Their sharp blades whistle through the air as they close in on the monster. Watching the chaos, he realizes, the Minotaur is not just strong, it has a terrible hidden power that destroys all their expectations. They coordinate the next move and release Alcaraz arrows, poison projectiles, consecrated by the temple, aiming directly at the beast's blind spot. The Minotaur reacts with a speed that defies belief, swatting the projectiles off their trajectory before they can hit. He freezes in disbelief as the creature snorts contemptuously, clearly understanding their tactics and mocking the failed attempt. He watched as the beast lunged forward with terrifying speed, its massive axe slicing through the air. Its eyes were fixed on the company, radiating a predatory focus, showing it was far from defeated. In the heat of the moment, Charlie urged Rystran to drop the sarcasm and switch to a new strategy, a three-pronged attack to neutralize the monster's weapon. Her determination hardened as she wove her father's legacy into her words, firmly resolved to prove her worth. They moved in unison, tightening the ring around the Minotaur, and between them the air thickened with anxious tension. Memories surged back. Her father, Gil Lynx, handed her his sacred wand. He demanded she prove worthy to hold his legacy, and now it burned with fire in every move she made in this deadly dance. She clenched her nerves into iron, and chanting her oath, called for his approval to prove what she was truly capable of. With a scream, she unleashed an icy spell, turning the ground into thin ice while the others launched their coordinated strikes at the beast. The air was torn apart by a storm of blows as they charged the attack, but the frustration only grew. Every strike met a perfect, impenetrable defense. Despite the magical bonds and wounds that spread blood across his body, the Minotaur did not lose a step. He guarded vital places with infallible, instinctive precision, and all their combined strikes remained futile. The beast stood firm, while the travelers still fought in rhythm with the exhausting weight of mental fatigue. They knew their limited supplies of restorative potions would only delay exhaustion for a certain time. She stood her ground, humming a spell to summon the mighty scorching light. The air flared up as soon as she continued her rhythmic song, weaving the anger of red bronze and the longing of grey-blue into a swirling vortex of flame. He shouted for her to stop, warning, "These long, complex spells leave her completely defenseless against the monster's reach." She ignored the warning, her eyes blazed with confidence that the future Magmaster could not lose against such a petty enemy. Due to her hesitation to break the spell, the creature lunged into attack. Its gigantic figure moved with such speed that there was no room left for defense. The blow landed with a disgusting sound, and her allies screamed in horror as the battlefield suddenly broke off with this brutal turn of events. A diving, piercing screech cuts through the air. The blade descends and strikes with deadly precision. Sudden cruelty makes a comrade shriek in terror, and blood splatters on the ground. He stands amid the carnage, his great saber trembling under the weight of battle, and she desperately calls his name. Recalling his father's wisdom that magic users need restraint, he forced himself to breathe. His face was bloodied, but his determination only grew stronger. She clings to him, and there is a barely audible whisper in her voice when she apologizes for the dire situation they found themselves in. Comrade in the Union anxiously watches as the monstrous beast lets out a deafening roar. Its power surges in waves as it prepares to unleash devastating fury. When the creature's aura flares, he orders them to drink the yellow potion, knowing it is their only hope to stop the relentlessly approaching madman. They squeal and scurry to gulp down that prepared mixture. Their movements are frantic because they realize this is their last desperate chance to break free from that onslaught. When the potion flows in the veins, they freeze, preparing for the strike, and watch intently the beast rushing forward. The final clash has just begun. He froze in complete disbelief when the beast broke all known limits. Its continuous, furious rage shattered expectations. Such power could only be unleashed once. With a disgusting crunch, the creature tore through the air, and its movements became increasingly chaotic and deadly. The revelation struck them with the weight of a falling mountain. The demonic creature was not just leveling the field, it was learning in real time, a horror that shattered all their previous knowledge. Through this evolution, the danger soared in geometric progression. The creature showed the ability to grow in a way that was supposed to be impossible for any inhabitant of the labyrinth. The beast struck with brutal efficiency. Its giant axe swung and flew through the air to deliver a devastating blow. He shouted to his companion to retreat, his voice tensed as he prepared to face the onslaught. Nearby, a faint magical light began to flicker and shimmer. She cried out his name in despair, warning that the beast's howl would spare no one. But he turned to her with a grim, unwavering expression, deciding to intervene. He gripped his weapon tighter, and his voice remained steady as he cast off the burden of his father's orders and chose to fight of his own will. He stood his ground, his gaze fixed on the beast, unwilling to yield as he calculated the trajectory of the axe flying toward him. A surge of adrenaline, he parried the blow. Metal clanged as he managed to deflect the heavy weapon. But the victory was short-lived. The creature weakened from the second axe strike suddenly and gave a harsh, devastating flash. A revelation overwhelmed them all together. This was no ordinary monster but an anomaly of terrible intelligence. As the monster loomed, he pushed his companion to flee and survive at any cost. A brutal splash of blood stained the strike site as the monster's assault continued, relentless, all-conquering pressure. Nearby, the shards of the shattered magical barrier clinked faintly. The light faded, the protection was finally broken. Memories of the promise to protect her flooded his mind, transforming his primal terror into a desperate, hoarse cry of defiance. She released her inner strength, whispering a spell to summon the flames of retribution, and was ready to unleash a devastating magical attack. She screams in defiance, her voice trembling with rage as she vows to burn the beast for its cruelty to her fallen comrade. Her gaze locks onto the target, and she whispers a spell for binding flames that promise to turn the monster to ash. With a final, desperate surge of magical energy, she unleashes a stream of fire. It explodes forward and rushes at the Minotaur. Under the power of the magical discharge, the ground trembled wildly. Trapped in the explosion, the creature lets out a scream of pain, and the flames incinerate its body. Far from the battlefield, Guild President Logan watches the sunset from his office, his thoughts heavy with worries over the overdue party. He shares a quiet moment with a visitor, acknowledging, "The life of a guild leader never passes without burdens." He sits in stunned contemplation, his wrinkled features revealing deep anxiety as he calls himself Gil Lynx. He reflects on the nature of the beast and says its abnormal strength is a siren call that draws even the mightiest mages in the world to their inevitable doom. The bustling guild hall is still full of adventurers who are unaware of the tension rising behind closed doors. In the president's office, a cup of tea sits untouched as he nods to the bitter news. The team of investigators has vanished without a trace. He sits opposite an experienced warrior. The weight of the situation hangs heavy in the quiet room of the Mycenae Guild. The president of the guild strokes his beard, and his forehead wrinkles as he contemplates the mention of the Minotaur. His status flashed. Gil connects an S-class high-level adventurer while preparing to intervene. He rejects the warrior's offer to help, insisting that such a task is better entrusted to a master of magic. And with a sudden crackle of energy, he casts a teleportation spell. The warrior watches him leave, and a cheerful smile appears on his face. The president is just as carefree and impulsive as before. In a flash of light, he disappears from the room, and the warrior is left alone pondering the sudden departure. Carefully, he removed the hood from his head, then with a stone face turned to his companion and asked how everything was there. On the table, the found items were spread out, the clinking of metal and broken parts, a grim collection silently telling of failure. The man examined the remains and with a heavy heart understood. The Minotaur in the boss's room on the 10th floor nowhere to be found. He found it hard to digest the consequences. He could not fathom how 3 such travelers could have died against an enemy they were fully capable of defeating. Realizing the full weight of the mystery, he decided to act cautiously and announced that he intended to go to the royal palace. In a moment, he was left alone in the office. The silence pressed down on him with a heavy feeling as he pondered the dark turn of events. His mind raced through the options. The beast abandoned its post, or the travelers managed to force a deadly stalemate. Deep in the labyrinth, a heavy, muffled, rhythmic thudding echoed across the stone floor, announcing a presence that shattered all expectations. He stands amid the cold stone. His gigantic body tightens a solid tension when he firmly grips the heavy axes, and his eyes blaze with a burning hunger for a worthy challenge. In the depths of his own primal mind, he spins the path forward and wonders if the labyrinth's depths will ever yield opponents capable of testing his true strength. The beast begins to roam. Its heavy steps thunder through the corridors, and it growls a challenge into the darkness, driven only by the sharp sensation of the hunt. The next morning, the guild president receives a report that makes him noticeably tremble, and when the 9th floor is mentioned, his eyes widen in disbelief. He listens as the details unfold. A group of novice adventurers stumbled upon the boss of the 10th floor, the Minotaur, far from its designated zone. Though the story sounds like a feverish delirium, the consistency in the witnesses' testimony suggests they are telling the absolute truth about the beast's indifference toward them. Lost in thought, the president sighs heavily, resting his hand on his chin, and orders all adventurers to be notified immediately. He tries to comprehend how such a thing could happen at all. Monsters lack the cunning to climb stairs. Yet the evidence confirms this creature has defied the very laws of the dungeon. He rubbed his temples, visibly agitated by the report, and admitted, "This is an unprecedented crisis for the guild." His colleague suggested the anomaly might be artificial, a result of a powerful subjugation spell, but he still did not believe such a thing could be quickly confirmed. She reminded him of the man who is now diving into the labyrinth and asks if he has not forgotten about this. The blade of that traveler gleamed, a silent verdict of danger ahead. Lord Percival stood ready, back straight, posture cold and disciplined, so he was prepared to face the unknown. Before him, from the depths, rose a huge stone golem, its heavy fist clenched with a dull sound, as if tectonic plates were grinding and screeching. The beast lunged forward with terrible speed, and the ground cracked from the sheer force of its charge. He instantly turned. Movements were smooth and precise, as he met the devastating blow of the giant golems with a thunderous clash. He sharply lunged forward. The blade struck the stone giant, and the thunderous impact scattered fragments across the cave floor. The knight dodges a giant, devastating punch. The stone cracks under the colossal force of the golem's own momentum as it crashes into the ground. With a sharp, precise movement, he drives the sword into the very heart of the creature. The blade bites in and effortlessly pierces the ancient rock. The warrior stands unshaken, his blade pulses with rhythmic magical energy that begins to destroy the form of the golems. As the golem crumbles, a flash of incredibly bright light bursts from the fragments. The dust clears, revealing a rare glowing artifact left there. The remains of stone fragments scatter into nothingness, leaving only a quiet, empty chamber behind. A radiant gleam floods the space it emanates from the treasure, now lying exposed on the dungeon floor. The found object is a chilling reminder. The 50th floor is the limit, allowed only for elite lone adventurers. He stands amid the flickering glow at night called the Heavenly Sword, having pushed himself to the limit to reach this unprecedented death. Death, the reality of his place, lands. He descended to the 96th floor. With a sharp metallic clatter, he draws his blade, and his gaze fills with hardness, preparing to face the horrors of this deadly death. 10 hours have passed since the descent to the 14th floor of the laboratory. He rests in the very cave, taking a pause to eat after finishing an exhausting fight on the deeper levels. Knight Percival Merculius is an eccentric figure, although he leads the house of the direct line of aristocrats. He prefers to spend time wandering the labyrinth alone. He is known as the Heavenly Sword. His fame is legendary. At 12 he became a traveler, at 14 an A-class, and at 15 after defeating the Zohar bandits he rose to S-class. It is said that his skill is a gift from the heavens. Looking back on his path, he acknowledges the value of this research. It allowed him to master the use of the Indie Shield against giant enemies. He possesses 5 ancient artifacts: the Alestra bracelet for magic dispersion, the Indie Shield for physical deflection, the Reich ring for offensive magic, the Bolton amulet for magic absorption, and the Calden dagger for neutralizing abnormal states. Although no one has yet been able to use these rare items to their full power, he grips the hilt with firm intent and resolutely prepares to master them. He aims at the main goal to reach the 100th floor, unleash all his power, and conquer the labyrinth's main beast, the Metal Dragon. He sat by the trembling campfire, unwavering in his decision to pass the labyrinth trial alone, letting no one come near. While he pondered the path ahead, the flames leapt with fiery tongues, and he knew his journey would be defined by sharpened blades and formidable opponents. Despite the strength of his inner resolve, his calm face did not change. It concealed the ambition burning inside. His gaze was hardened. It reflected a singular focus that broke beyond the ordinary concerns of common travelers. Far from the depths of the labyrinth, the Travelers Guild sign hung quietly, marking the place of bureaucratic order. Inside, the staff reviewed the logistics of his supplies and noted, such a huge amount of incoming food meant he would soon return to the surface. The guild president discussed the situation, acknowledging that the knight would likely resist any attempt at formal subjugation. But he was a man irresistibly drawn to the relentless search for truth. He warned, although the labyrinth bosses hold their territories, the real danger lies in the unpredictability of those who roam outside the established floor rules. He voiced his growing concern and asked whether the Minotaur would intercept him at night on the return path. She explained that proximity to the surface determines the density of the labyrinth, though she admitted such an encounter was not entirely impossible. The analysis continued. The likelihood of crossing paths with the monster at night was significantly higher than that of an average adventurer on these particular floors. He summarized the assessment with a grim observation. The risk of such a confrontation remained alarmingly high. In the depths of the labyrinth, the knight rushed forward at a dazzling speed. The blade cuts through the air to strike the monster. The beast roared madly in pain, and the steel sank deeper and deeper, its dark house-like eyes splashing ichors against the stone walls. In a moment, the fighters dashed back in different directions, and the weight of the clash pressed down on them as they stood on the 6th floor. The Minotaur stood, breathing heavily, clutching its wounded chest from which blood slowly dripped onto the floor. The beast stood motionless, and its eyes narrowed as soon as it realized. The strike that night did not pierce the heart, it only cut muscles and flesh. It stretched out its hands, and its fingers slid into a radiant magical circle that appeared in the air right before it. With a sharp, twisted jerk, the creature pulled a heavy blade from the depths of the portal, and the knight froze, stunned by what it saw. The weapon emerged fully. Its weight and blade were clearly formidable, as the monster gripped it with deadly intent. The Minotaur swung the stolen sword with insane strength. The air whistled, as the massive blade cut through the distance between them. The truth came out. The creature had learned to use bags, the very inventory magic used by travelers it had previously defeated. The knight noticed the anomaly and grew increasingly frightened, realizing a monster capable of such advanced magic on the 6th floor was an unprecedented threat. He barely managed to dodge the blow. Thoughts raced as he realized the terrible speed and intelligence of this creature. He watched as the magical source of light flickered and shimmered, its glow fading in the suffocating confines of the dungeon. The flame suddenly blazed with new strength, forcing silent reflection on the unpredictability of the labyrinth. In the depths of the shadows, the beast let out a low, hoarse roar, its eyes burning with a predatory intelligence that did not fit its monstrous form. He met the creature's gaze with a calm, even face, and felt a chilling thrill of excitement in the challenge that awaited ahead. Armed to the limit, the knight and the demonic beast froze in a battle stance. A deadly clash was about to happen. The silence of the dungeon cracked under the weight of their impending strike. A deafening roar rolls across the arena, and magical circles ignite one after another in the sky, flooding the wildly buzzing crowd below with light. He stands unwavering amid the trembling, his gaze fixed firmly on the spectacle unfolding above him. The atmosphere thickens with tension as the clash begins, the devil soaring to the heavens and the sword cutting through the earth. The spectacle is simply called a fight. He contemplates the name of the techniquegist like the usual one. Looking back, the elder recalls the magic user from the Imperial Military Inspection Martial Arts Tournament, held 8 years ago, notes him as a truly memorable opponent. A few days before the current confrontation, he sat in the guild president's office and had a calm conversation. The elder seaman explains, although Seaman Comet is incredibly powerful, using it requires a lot of time and magical energy, so in a one-on-one duel at the tournament, it is extremely unusual. He listens attentively as the elder says, not just the technique, even more impressive is the event that happened immediately after its use. He tensed as a storm of dark, star-shaped projectiles crashed down from above to the ground. They bit into the soil with heavy, rhythmic, dull blows. The blows increased, and the arena turned into a chaotic landscape. Explosions and debris flew in all directions. Amid the ruins, he moved confidently, and precisely his armor gleamed as he made his way through the treacherous terrain. Later, in a quiet office, he recounted to the elder about his trial, emphasizing how he managed to escape the falling stars almost without losses. The elder listened attentively while he explained. The opponent deliberately avoided a direct strike and chose another strategy. He replayed in his mind the realization. The strike was aimed at the ground there, it raised turbulence, forcing him to take a defensive position. The technique was stunning, he admitted. Even for a moment it knocked out his ability to both attack and defend. The elder noted that the audience froze breathless, unable to understand how the legendary knight was driven to such despair. He looked at the arena, the crowd murmured dully in impatience, wondering what would happen at this very moment. His gaze remained fixed and unyielding, no sign of the storm already brewing inside. Suddenly and sharply, she extended her hand, her eyes flashed with tension as she gripped her weapon tighter. The air exploded with a deafening clang of metal struck metal, and the fighters clashed in a carousel of sharp blows. Their gazes locked, a quiet conversation of determination flashed between them in the heat of the clash. He intervened, his voice thundered over the arena as he ordered the fight to stop immediately. Officials declared the duel over, citing a violation as the reason for the sudden disqualification, and named the winner. He replayed the result in his mind, and concluded that his opponent's choice was completely without any nobility. He sat opposite his master and listened as he insisted that in their recent encounter a normal person might have died, but the heavenly sword emerged and with a whirlwind burned away the proof of his intuition and rapid combat skill. The knight proposed a simple deal, lamenting that the break had stolen from them a truly magnificent fight, and its result remained a mystery even to him. A shadow of disappointment flashed across his face as he recalled the loss of such a worthy opponent. His interlocutor continued, noting that although such foolish attempts to please the ruthless family happened often, the referee's decision was extremely unusual. The old man leaned closer, addressing him directly, Percival Sama, and deliberately spoke about the labyrinth. He slowly, thoughtfully sipped his tea, and his face revealed nothing as he replayed the memory of the dangerous place in his mind. Breaking the silence, he calmly, without excess emotion, remarked that the tea served to him was of excellent quality. His master smiled, and when he returned from the labyrinth, offered him more. At the same time, with a smirk, noted that for the head of Mercilius' house it was a great honor to be pleased by such humble leaves. He sits opposite his master, and the silence in the room presses an unspoken agreement, hangs like a heavy stone. Outside the window, the night sky stretches deep and dark, a silent witness to the decisions made inside. The silence breaks as the gaze slips into the depths of the labyrinth, where the rhythmic loud clash of steel on stone echoes through the corridors. Within the stone walls, the knight engages in a fierce dance-like clash of blades. His sword relentlessly battles the monster's heavy axes, and sparks and violence flare in a continuous blur. The knight narrows his eyes and his gaze sticks firmly to the beast before him. He mutters to himself, acknowledging the stubborn vitality of this creature. He analyzes the situation and notes, the monster's weapon speed and muscular strength far exceed all expectations. He understands ordinary attacks do not work, yet he does not look away from the creature's eyes, hoping to notice a rare item in its hands that will break this deadlock. The beast abruptly looks back, its predatory gaze fixed on the knight, with primal strength and tension. When the monster swings its heavy axe, the knight parries the blow, and through the ringing steel thinks about the limitations of his longsword and the need for a more precise technique. He instantly unleashes a flurry of strikes, fast and skillful, and drives the creature into defense with all his might. Steel rings throughout the area. The relentless pressure continues. The knight lands a precise blow that cuts the beast and draws blood, momentarily confusing it. The momentum of the clash knocks the knight off his feet. For a moment, his supporting stance breaks from the pure force of this exchange. Gathering his strength, he lifts his gaze to the monster, while the beast, surprised by the sudden turn of events, raises a sharp, wide-eyed shock. He lunged forward, and his blade cut into the massive body of the beast with a thunderous blow that echoed through the entire chamber. The exchange of blows grew more furious. Steel and stone merged into continuous motion, and he parried and struck so fiercely that the floor cracked from the fury of their clashes. In the heat of the fight, a small vial slipped from his grasp, it clinked against the stone floor, and rolled away from the combatants. The Minotaur's eyes suddenly widened sharply as soon as he saw the fallen object. An instinctive understanding overwhelmed his being. He stood, breathing heavily, and his posture revealed exhaustion that finally began to crush his weary body. Exhausting training for the lower levels pushed him beyond his physical limits, but the beast was unaware of the true nature of the potion he carried and focused only on the opening that his fatigue revealed. When the monster charged again, he wondered if his calculated display of weakness had indeed forced the creature into the trap. With a sharp, desperate movement, he firmly grasped his weapon, freezing in readiness for the final decisive clash as the beast lunged to snatch him. He barely managed to slip away from the monstrous massive axe, which thundered into the stone floor. The Minotaur completes a wide, sweeping swing, forcing the knight to retreat and keep his distance. The blade whistles through the air, and a drop of sweat falls to the ground, a mark of the entire brutality of the fight. He suddenly lunges forward, and the sword cuts through the air, desperately seeking a breach in the monster's defense. The knight was increasingly horrified. His strikes were too shallow, they did not reach the vital points of the beast, leaving him defenseless. He firmly plants his feet and slides forward on a fragment of the labyrinth floor to stabilize his stance for a countermaneuver. With a sharp burst of strength, he presses into the floor and prepares to meet the next frontal attack. His gaze is fixed tightly on the monster flying forward, and his determination grows as the heavy muffled blows of its approach thunder throughout the chamber. He stands locked in tense confrontation, his blade raised and aimed against the fur-covered mass, the beast digging in the stone corridor. The knight watches the creature's movements and is struck by realization. The monster does not just react, it anticipates each of his strikes in advance. He deduces the truth. The demon calculates the reach of its own limbs and weapons, adjusting its defense to remain perfectly outside the range of a lethal blow. His heart pounds. He decides to pour his entire soul into the fight and wonders if his endurance will hold while the monster relentlessly strikes with precision. The beast gasps ragged, heavy breaths, its eyes locked on him with predatory focus. Sudden crackling energy flares very close, a reminder of what the labyrinth is, as he prepares for the final clash. His gaze hardens, eyes narrow, he silently but boldly challenges his opponent. The monster roars and lunges forward, tearing the hopeless balance with a deafening scream. He restrains the monster's attack with complete focus, their weapons clash, and the blades whirl like a steel storm so that words become unnecessary. The warrior and the monster collide in a whirlwind of steel, and the air hums with the tension of their strike. He took a devastating blow. His gaze locked fiercely into the monster's wild pattern of eyes while the blades danced a deadly rhythm. Nearby, a torch flickers faintly. The flame rages and jerks in a furious dance from the sheer force of its movements. The exchange continues relentlessly, a merciless cycle of strike and parry, leaving no room for hesitation. A muffled roar and the creature lunged forward. Jaws snapped in the air, tearing the silence with primal fury. He absorbs the heavy lunge, his boots slide across the stone floor, but he stays on his feet. The beast narrows its eyes, a flash of irritation runs across its features, because the opponent stubbornly does not fall. He stands unshaken, his armor is stained not with the monster's blood, but his own, a testament to the cost of the battle. He clenched his teeth and endured the merciless onslaught, while the beast grew more enraged, unable to deliver a decisive blow to such a small opponent. The warrior lunged forward, his armor clanged against the monster's hide as he barely dodged a devastating strike. With a sharp circular motion, he deflected the heavy axes, making the creature understand. Its reckless aggression will not overcome the heavenly sword. And the distance between them began to shrink, and the beast stretched forward, threatening to break his defense. Exhaustion finally took its toll. For a moment, his movements faltered. The monster immediately revealed the vulnerability and finished him off with a blow that thundered. The force of the blow threw him backward. His breath faltered as he tried to stay on his feet, yet he still managed to keep the blade ready for a counterattack. He pressed his boots into the ground with all his might to hold on, barely avoiding a repeated swing of the huge axe that slammed into the stone floor. With a terrible sweep, he retreated, carving out space for himself while his body cried out for rest. The duel had reached its limit. He is driven with all his strength into the cold stone floor. The blow echoes in the armor as the beast looms above. Trying to regain balance, he lunges forward, his blade cuts into the monster's skin with a desperate arc. The warrior turns with smooth grace, crashing into the creature, but his movements falter as soon as the beast begins to stagger. Balance is lost. A sudden, brutal strike cuts through the silence. The collision sends shockwaves into the air as steel scrapes against horn. The blow throws the creature backward. A heavy thud echoes in the chamber as it struggles with all its might to hold its position. He presses the gained advantage. The sword strikes more intensely, until suddenly a sharp glint in his eyes signals a change of focus. The beast roars and charges with its colossal bulk at terrifying speed. Its strike almost hits him, but he barely dodges the deadly lunge. These sleds slide across the floor, stopping as soon as the monster reemerges in the shadows, and two fighters are frozen in a deadly, continuous confrontation, not taking their eyes off each other. He stood gasping, his heart pounding like a hammer against his ribs, while the beast before him rasped, struggling to catch its own breath. The warrior's gaze fixed on the mangled, heavily breathing chest of the creature. An involuntary trembling shiver ran through him as he prepared for the next strike. Despite the fatigue, an unwilling respect flared in his thoughts for a moment. The monster's unyielding stubbornness was simply incredible. Nearby, a small flame flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to echo the primal, scorching rage harbored by the Minotaur. Blood welled from his wounds, seeping onto his armor. Yet he remained unmoved, his eyes narrowed as he prepared to break through the limits of his own strength. With a sharp metallic clang, he raised his blade. A sudden flash of determination confused the beast as the final confrontation began. The beast looms over the fallen knight. Its heavy steps thunder on the cold stone floor as it closes the distance. It moves forward cautiously but with devastating weight, and each step sounds like a verdict. The end is already approaching for the lying warrior. A predatory gleam flickers in the creature's eye. It does not avert its gaze from the mangled body before it. Under its terrifying furry paw, the ground trembles as the monster prepares to strike. Suddenly, the knight shifts a round glow of energy. It bursts from its place to catch the beast by surprise. The force of the sudden counterattack clung to the creature's leg, tearing through muscle and fur. Blood sprays into the air like a fountain. As soon as the strike finds its target, the beast loses balance, being sliced open on the move. The monster shudders from shock, its face contorted with agony. It abruptly recoils, clutching the mangled limb now splattering crimson. The beast trembled, breathing heavily and gasping for air in ragged, desperate gulps. Pain from the wounded leg pulsed through its massive body. In the silence, a faint arc-shaped beam barely trembled. It marked the presence of a deadly barrier. Percival's blade, raising the sphere of inevitable death, cut off everything that dared to reach and step within its range. She remained crouched behind this shimmering defense, while his posture was tense and vigilant. The monster glared with fury and realized getting closer under such a threat was impossible. She believed that patience was her only ally. If she just waited, the man ahead would inevitably succumb to his own fatigue. Blood still flowed from his own mortal wound, a grim reminder. He had reached his absolute limit. A crooked, mocking grin spread across her face as she decided to wait. She was certain that only endurance would claim victory. He lunged forward abruptly. His gigantic figure crashed into the ground with a roar, the impact seeming like an explosion, shaking the very foundations of these elegant structures. Skidding into a slide, the monster stops and struggles to stay on its feet. Its breathing is ragged until the sound of battle finally makes itself felt. He spits blood onto the stone floor and asks himself if he has gone completely mad or perhaps turned into a fool who chose this path. Understanding overwhelms him. He is drawn not to the empty triumph of victory, but to the bare, untouched essence of the fight. His eyes blaze with primal power, fixed on a single goal: to engage in a fight to the death against a truly invincible opponent. Glancing at the fallen knight, he sees a motionless figure. His own wounds ooze blood red onto the cold ground. Now he understands. His target is not the head nor the heart of the knight, but something much deeper, rooted in the very essence of the warrior. The beast recognizes the truth. The sword is the very life of the knight, and it is this blade he must shatter to claim his final reward. He firmly presses his hooves into the rocky ground, and his massive palms grip the weapon tighter and tighter with a single destructive resolve. The shadow of the monster comes from below. It looms over the fallen knight, and the circle of light highlights the vulnerability of his opponent. A heavy breath bursts from his nostrils as he watches a torch flicker nearby, its fading light reflected in the motionless eyes of the knight. He takes a deliberate step forward, the dull, heavy thud of his hoof echoing through the silence in the chamber. With a sharp, fierce swing, he twists the axe. The blade cuts the air in a wide, deadly arc. The strike converges with a blinding flash, and when the dust settles, the knight blade is seen bending under colossal pressure. A sharp, deafening crack of metal tears through the silence. The knight's eyes widen sharply as his strength finally fails. He grips the hilt of his broken blade, the steel now only a torn, useless fragment. With a roar, the beast of iron plunges down, and its gigantic axe chops the air, carving a path of utter destruction. The blow lands with brutal force, and the surroundings are splattered with blood-red spray. The strike rolls like a wave through the knight's armor, an incredible weight threatening to crush him completely. Blood splatters fly against the cold stone walls as the assault's pressure tears through his defense with every moment. He falls to his knees, gasping for air, and the monster looms over him, its own breath as ragged and heavy. Raising his eyes, he freezes, pressing his gaze into the abyss of his own defeat. Vision blurs, and the world begins to fade. The beast raises the bloodied axe one last time, eyes burning, with the cold intent of an executioner. He grips so hard it cracks. His gigantic hand grinds the knight's armor and body into the icy stone floor. The beast does not cease its merciless assault. Its eyes blaze with sadistic thirst as it forces the broken warrior to endure a new agony. A rough roar bursts from its throat. It demands more resistance, more pain, and more life for its dying prey. It growls its twisted desires, commanding the knight to hold on in battle, to continue suffering, and not to let death become a release. Beneath the blood-stained visor, the knight's eyes dimly flash. A barely noticeable, stubborn spark remains even amid the ruin of his body. He seizes a cruel, bloody smile, blood flows and trembles, and his spirit is unbreakable even when the armor around him is shattered to pieces. The monster hangs suspended. Its predatory gaze stops and narrows. It felt an unexpected resistance rising from the broken mass. Silence settles in the chamber itself, leaving only the discarded remnants of the knight's gear scattered across the bloody, slippery floor. It fixed its gaze on the shattered remains of the shield, once a flawless surface, now covered with a network of torn, jagged cracks. The cracks spread even deeper, reflecting the complete collapse of the defense this night. When the beast loomed over the broken warrior, something strange and still unfamiliar stirred in its monstrous heart, a moment of something unlike rage. In the deep stone corridors, the beast remains scorched in shadow, its gigantic body curled in anticipation. She fixes her gaze ahead, and her eyes blaze with a single predatory focus. Deaf, rhythmic clatter of hooves on the floor, and the creature steps into the blinding brightness of light. His joints crack from excessive, unnatural growth. The body swells as power waves through his entire structure. Steam rises from his body as muscles twitch and harden. Even the very air around the beast hisses from the force of this transformation. Against the backdrop of all this evolution, the Minotaur realizes his strength has grown beyond what it was before. Nearby, the armored knight stands frozen, broken, and defeated. His consciousness dims as he sees the monster rise horrifically. The beast looms over the battlefield, a titan reborn. His presence is absolute, and there is no one to challenge him. He looms over the fallen knight, his gaze fixed on the remnants of the battle. From an abandoned gadget suddenly bursts a sharp, blinding flash, signaling a change in the labyrinth's energy. The beast stands among a pile of armor and weapons, his gigantic figure casting a long, threatening shadow over the prey. He watches the scene with cold calculation. As life fades within these walls, the bodily remains disappear, leaving only inanimate things behind. Roughly, without mercy, he sweeps up the scattered items. Metal clinks as he declares this the knight's property. A discarded sword and trinkets lie in his palm, trophies of victory that have emptied the labyrinth floor, leaving it without its former inhabitant. He snorts, and his gaze shifts as soon as he draws a glowing magic circle and directs the power he has just acquired. With a final sharp movement, he drives the magic into the ground and declares the space his own. He felt the heavy retribution of his recent battles. Even though the wounds healed during leveling, his muscles and heart begged for rest. Seeking refuge, he retreated into the depths of the labyrinth. Heavy footsteps echoed on the stone as he searched for a place to sleep. The dark, narrow corridor gave him solitude away from any intrusions of strangers. Several days passed in the Sazardine labyrinth, where on the first floor small wolf-like creatures prowled the wet stone corridors. The young traveler moved with the honed precision of practice. He drew his blade and with one swift, deadly stroke struck one of the monsters. He wiped sweat from his forehead, tightly clutching the hard-earned coins before signaling his party to head to the guild. As they walked, one of the squad members questioned the wisdom of entering such a dangerous place and reminded them that luck was the only reason they survived. Meanwhile, at the Mycenae Village Adventurers Guild, Gillinks arrived late, conveying Logan's apologies for the delay caused by his various errands. He took a sip of tea and pondered the recent audience with the king, recalling that the second queen had taken measures against the cold earlier that morning. The old man questioned the truthfulness of his information, whether it was really the queen who gave such hints. He thoughtfully said that in the royal court, conflicts arise from the refusal to think about how to wield power. They discussed the nature of monsters and noted, from a monster's perspective, humans are the true villains. He recalled hearing this from a sage years ago. He asserted, even if monsters do not define concepts like happiness or justice, just like humans, they still have their own measures of success and failure. A deep awareness settled in his eyes, intellect and value, connected by common threads that bind humans and monsters. He sighed deeply and remarked that humans often treat monsters more cruelly than they deserve, thus touching on a sharper hint about his own humanity. While they were conversing, they were suddenly interrupted by a knock on the door. He shifted his gaze to the incident with the Minotaur and began waiting for further reports from higher levels. He silently looks at the evidence, frowning intently and asking what could have happened. The guild hall buzzes with restless energy, a sea of travelers whisper, filling the space with anxious guesses. He lifts the found traveler's medal. Its surface trembles with a barely audible, eerie hum as he confirms it belongs to the legendary swordsman. The elder urges him to remain calm, advising once again to thoroughly assess these items to be 100% sure of their origin. Clutching the evidence tightly, he notes, such a huge amount of equipment is far beyond what one traveler can carry, so this property belongs to an elite party led by Morin Sam. Nearby, a traveler intervenes, He says he is not the leader and that they are not an official team. He simply hired passersby to help carry the unmanageable burden he himself found. They exchange puzzled glances and cannot understand why a warrior of such high status works on the 6th floor, right by the stairs to the 5th. In the very labyrinth, the truth was shackled and abandoned, among a pile of forsaken supplies. He stood among the restored equipment, his voice rising nervously as he urged his companion to begin the appraisal of rare items, questioning whether the guild's rules on the distribution of such treasures would truly apply to them. Returning to his colleague, he asked if he could leave the rest of the tasks in his skilled hands, seeking at least a little rest. She nodded in confirmation of the request, indicating that she would handle the distribution procedures and await the final appraisal results. The heavy door creaked open, and he entered the office. His appearance immediately made the man at the desk focus on him. He spoke with a heavy heart and admitted, among the found remains they came across the fool's boots. He explained that these boots were used as weights for training, proof that to surface from the deepest levels, harsh and dangerous methods were applied. The realization came. These cursed things were created to significantly reduce the physical capabilities of the wearer, a cruel trap, a true maiming. Frustration boiled over and he slammed his fist on the table, the knock echoing the full weight of the discovery. He stood trembling, his composure shattered the moment he realized that even with the fool's boots, no monster on the 6th floor could have brought down the heavenly sword. The improbability pressed so hard that his grip grew ever stronger until the tabletop itself rumbled from the tension and fragments cracked beneath his fingers. The man's face twisted with rage as he realized. The heavenly sword did not fall to some ordinary monster, it was cunningly and deliberately trapped. He gritted his teeth, his eyes burning with indignation, refusing to accept the reality of such a humiliating end. The fallen warrior sought only the life of a wanderer, turning away from the glory of the superficial world and striving to find balance in the depths of the labyrinth. Returning to his companion, he demanded from the guild president that he give his power to expose the truth behind the trap that attributed the heavenly sword. The president urged him to remain calm and consider the full seriousness of the situation, but the man remained unshaken in his agitation. He slammed his palm on the table and asked if they really believed that the Minotaur could overthrow heaven and earth. And the president noted that a new confirmed anomaly had appeared in the laboratory. The president warned that the status of the heavenly sword would cause noticeable waves in the human world, hinting, that event reflects the tragedy of Hazel's daughter. He snorted disdainfully at the distraction and insisted, ignoring the immediate anomaly unfolding right before them would be a terrible mistake. He stares intently, demanding to find out where this man's true loyalties lie, in the outside world or in the depths of the labyrinth. The old man swallows, his eyes narrowing as he contemplates the full weight of the accusation. He admits that he is not fit for his position, yet still rejects the idea that he abandoned his duty. And he asks, can the value of life really be reduced to the worth of a body or just memories? The conversation shifts to the fallen knight. They acknowledge that he is a dear friend, and at the same time emphasize there is no time to delay. They must track and stop the Minotaur and figure out how this is connected to the death of the heavenly sword. He leans forward, his face stern, and begs for help and despair. The legendary mage practitioner stands tall, his presence completely commanding. He is called by name. Deep in the labyrinth of Sazard on the 10th floor, a single drop of water disturbs the surface of the pool, and this barely audible sound reveals the silent, grimly restrained presence of the boss. The beast's eyes suddenly open wide, burning with predatory hunger. The beast's eyes suddenly open wide in the darkness, shining with predatory power. It lurked in the shadows while the traveling party, stumbled upon its lair. Their voices thundered with brazen carelessness as they discussed the rarity of things that fall from such creatures. They laugh among themselves, brushing off danger as mere preparation for deeper floors, completely unaware of the gaze fixed upon them. Rising to its full gigantic height, the monster looms over the newcomers. Its bulky figure casts a long shadow, instantly extinguishing their audacity. The adventurers prepare for battle. Their initial feigned indifference disappears as the cold truth dawns. Before them stands a real Minotaur. He grips his weapon even tighter, and his confidence does not waver. He is already waiting for the prey from the upcoming slaughter. A thunderous strike, the creature lunged forward with its whole body, and from the sheer force the knight's silence shattered, while he begged with a desperate cry. The knight is marked in the air by a swift flight. Blood spurts in all directions, and the relentless power of the monster turns the clash into a one-sided massacre. She rose amid the carnage. The fallen traveler's gears were scattered like thrown toys. The monster dismantled them effortlessly, and its strength far exceeded their modest level 30 capabilities. When he made a soft, wet sound, he wiped the blood from his snout. His movements were calm and strangely precise. The creature crouched low, its massive body curled up, and a new anxious silence settled within it. This evolution broke beyond mere physical strength. It was a fundamental shift in its very nature. A surge of cognitive power overwhelmed its mind, granting it the ability for complex analysis and information processing previously unknown. It released a heavy, thoughtful exhale. The sound echoed through the silent labyrinth. In the depths of heightened consciousness, it began to dissect the recently fought duel against the knight. It replayed every strike and parry, calculating countless alternative outcomes to grasp the art of combat through pure cold calculations. He shuddered. He had just realized he won a battle he was supposed to lose. It was the first time he met an opponent so formidable that it shook him from within, and from the sheer power of the displayed technique he fell into terror. The beast stood silently, and the expression on its face could not be read as it pondered the weight of this encounter. The blade traced a soft arc carved in the void by his opponent. The imprint faded in the creature's memory, indelible, one that would never vanish. A sudden epiphany swept through him like a wave when he saw a pack of smaller monsters prowling the dark corridors. He moved forward, heavy steps echoing through the stone passage, as he approached the pack with renewed determination. Delving into thoughts, he was trying to understand the swordsman's desire, having no idea whether the peak that man was reaching for was the very moment he himself was destined to reach. With a stubbornness tempered by his evolution, he was preparing for the path ahead, hungry for even greater enemies and even deadlier battles. Deep on the 7th floor of Gazardin Labyrinth, travelers whisper in disbelief, asking if the rumors about the monster with a cow's head are really manifesting right before them. They freeze in tense silence as the giant creature suddenly settles. Its formidable figure bends as if under an invisible weight. Recognizing the beginning, the archer decides to test the beast's endurance. He chooses Junker's message arrow to probe its true strength without exposing himself to a direct, reckless assault. She draws the bowstring to the limit and releases the projectile with accuracy. The arrow hits the minotaur, but the strike only clangs against its skin. It does not penetrate. Unyielding, they unleash an even more powerful blow. The thunder of iron explodes, and the creature sinks into smoke and debris. As the dust settles, the travelers prepare for the next stage of their tactical clash. The smoke disperses, revealing the severed wrist of the minotaur, evidence that their coordinated attack worked. With grim satisfaction, she surveys the result. The beast is extraordinarily resilient, but they managed to cut its offensive capabilities in half, and now they plan to immobilize the rest of its arm. She watched, unable to believe her own eyes, as the beast, despite the severe wound, began to move again with restored, unnatural strength. Before their eyes, a radiant arcane circle flared in the air, and the creature reached for the potion. The wounds began to stitch and close. Liquid drop by drop dripped into its maw, a desperate act of survival, defying the laws of the labyrinth. While the potion worked, the monster's mutilated hand began to recover. Flesh twisted and hardened back into a deadly weapon. She realized the full horror of the situation. The monster had learned to imitate human alchemy, and shouted to the others to retreat immediately. The creature stood towering, and its presence radiated a new, terrible threat beyond the capabilities of its kind. Even the monster froze for a moment at its own sudden recovery, clenched and unclenched the restored fingers coldly, in rhythm as if in a lesson. It mastered the power of red potion, turning the traveler's own salvation into the instrument of his demise. He bends and straightens. The newly restored arm joints crack as he tests the strength of his returned body. Far from the depths of the southern labyrinth, the outskirts of Mycenae City lie peacefully under a vast gloomy sky, covered by continuous cloudiness. The Traveler's Guild sign hangs prominently, marking the center of activity for those who dare the unknown. Inside, a group of seasoned adventurers has gathered, faces grim, as they discuss the growing threats within Mace. On the table lies a single lonely, radiant flower, its petals gently glowing with a soft, otherworldly light. The guild president sits at the table, carefully examining the mysterious bloom while simultaneously reviewing piles of official documents. He says that evaluating such a rare item, even for the heavenly sword, will take a month, and only after that does he hand it over to an elderly bearded man who accepts it with an understanding look. The bearded man squints, and his thoughts dive again into the labyrinth as he guesses which monster could have been responsible for such a find. He reviewed the reports, noting, the creature jumped between floors with the ease of an experienced traveler. The thought of a monster capable of that seemed absurd, but the evidence was increasingly hard for him to dismiss. He drew parallels between the monster and travelers, pondering how both could benefit from the unique properties of the labyrinth. He was struck by a terrible realization. The monster was not just surviving, it was leveling up. This grim prospect explained the fate of the previous batch. When the Minotaur gained strength in battles, its physical and mental abilities changed, evolved. He swallowed hard, and his thoughts again turned to the fallen knight, wondering if the monster really could surpass even the most legendary warriors. The question burned in his mind, what incredible power does the Minotaur now wield? Suddenly, someone knocked on the door. This broke his concentration. He flinched in his chair because he was interrupted in the middle of his grim exercises. He sighed deeply, furrowed his brow, and pondered the appearance of the stranger. The assistant immediately noticed his sudden paleness. She said that the arriving housekeeper of the Mercilius family had come to speak with him directly. The elder man processed the news. He confirmed that the visit was unrelated to the Heavenly Sword, as they had not yet released an official statement on the matter. At the mention of the Mercilius family, he visibly became embarrassed. Maintaining an even tone, he ordered the assistant to invite the visitor into the office, and she immediately confirmed the order. She returned to announce the arrival of Panya Laban, the maid of the Mercilius family, who was accompanied by Julius from the Zeldra family. The man towering in the doorway introduces himself as Panya Laban. His formidable figure fills the room as he stands next to the young companion. He gestures towards the table involving the guild president, Logan, politely welcomes them with an offer of tea and acknowledges the noble status of his guests. They settle into the quiet office, the air thick with the weight of formal introductions and the hidden meaning of this meeting. The visitor clarifies the honorifics used and explains that Zelger is the name of the noble's mother, after which he officially introduces the young Julius Amma. He reveals the true origin of the boy. Julius Amma is the legitimate heir of the Mercilius family, a name that carries enormous weight. The announcement causes a sharp commotion, the rumor of the presence of the son of the Heavenly Sword, and the question of marriage ripple through the room in shockwaves. To the guild leader's sudden agitation, he calmly insists, this solemnity is unnecessary. He reminds them they are currently on foreign territory. Then he thanks them for the care shown to the Heavenly Sword, and says that the legendary warrior has always felt calm under the watchful eye of the president. He continued his explanation and noted that the young lord has always found his way back to Mycenae, then insisted, there is something vital that the guild president must see. The old man's eyes suddenly widened in shock as soon as he recognized the object being pulled out, and his hands instinctively began weaving a protective magical seal sign in the air. A heavy, luxuriously carved case clicked shut and opened, revealing a crystal ball that was asleep and cracked. The internal light went out. The boy explained, in the morning the ball was completely functional, but in the evening its flame disappeared sharply and anxiously overturning his usual daily routine. He looked again at the guild president. He spoke evenly, begging for any information about where his lord was now. The tension in the hall shifted when a check was brought to the guild president to sign, and at that moment, the staff entered and served refreshments, briefly breaking the heavy atmosphere. They sat together in the silence of the office, and over their meeting hung the disappearance of the lord who was missed. Meeting, on the table lay a letter addressed to the house. Next to it, a list of found items and the adventure award order that once belonged to the missing knight. He solemnly announced that the remains of Lord Percival were found on the 6th floor of Sazard in Labyrinth. Noble continued, his voice trembled with grief as he spoke about his father, and the man opposite listened with a grim, focused expression. She looked down, her eyes filled with tears, as she asked herself if this was truly what her father desired in this tragic outcome. He told how the fallen lord always found joy in the labyrinth, sought honorable duels up to his last helpless death. Hayes intensified the pressure, promising that the truth about what happened to Lord Percival and the Minotaur would be revealed without any delay. He still held hope as he spoke about the legendary wizard, his friend and his mentor. Heavy silence exploded with a sudden harsh blow echoing through the depths. Deep on the 4th floor of Sazard Labyrinth, a hand reached down to pick up a fallen object. The ground cracked under the weight of the approaching threat. A sphere of concentrated energy appears, spinning, boiling, and tearing forward as the beast prepares to unleash its power. Energy explodes in a dazzling flash. The surroundings are instantly devoured by the roar of destruction. Amid the settling dust, a solitary figure steps forward, calm and unshaken by any chaos. He stands firm, his gaze fixed intently, and his posture radiates an aura of refined, experienced authority. The beast lunges through the air, whipping a hail of projectiles, which an invisible barrier stops mid-flight. With a deafening strike, the monster attacks again, but he does not budge. His hands remain steady. He continues the defense. The monster descends with a devastating blow, but he does not retreat, holding his position and preparing for the inevitable clash. Sudden awareness flashes in his eyes as the creature's jaws snap shut with a crash. The incredible force of the collision is about to overwhelm him. He releases a sharp, explosive burst of fury. The blade strikes with such raw, reckless power that it is about to shatter the very foundations of the magical defense. The hand rests on the table, the fingers adorned with a ring bearing a distinct, shimmering emblem. A bearded warrior offers his companion a delicate, shining flower, saying that he intended to give this gift to him specifically. He explains that this object is a sapphire shell, imbued with the vibrations of his own life essence, and serves as proof. He is alive as long as it continues to shine. The recipient bows his head, accepting the weight of the responsibility placed upon him. The warrior orders him to report immediately to the king if the light inside the shell ever goes out. The guild president silently watches, reading in the eyes the answer: whether the rumors are true that he traded with the king of the underworld for an immortal body. At the remark about how intriguing the rumors have become, a barely noticeable, self-satisfied smile spreads across the warrior's face. With sudden, devastating force, the pinnacle of wisdom and instruction crashes to the ground, crushing the resistance of iron and flesh beneath its mind. He stood his ground as the giant monster lunged forward. His blade cut into the creature's rage a precise, devastating strike. The monster jerked back. Its eyes widened as it realized the explosion was only a lure, a tactical, barely noticeable trap set to expose its guard. Through the revelation, it released a whole stream of energy. The strike shattered the ground beneath the beast and forced it to kneel. The monster hissed in agony, smoke rising from its charred hide, as it convulsively tried to recover after the devastating attack. He stubbornly watched the monster with a critical gaze, noting that its combat power far exceeded that of an ordinary human, the level of a 40th warrior. Suddenly, the monster began casting a spell, clutching the earth with its clawed hand. It created a shimmering, intricately woven magical circle. The ground trembled as the arcane sigil pulsed with dark light, a sign of forbidden technique activation. He froze in shocked surprise. In 50 years of adventures, he had never before encountered such a bizarre and dangerous anomalous phenomenon in a laboratory. He stared into the distance, his thoughts wildly racing as he tried to comprehend. Could he really be seeing a fragment of an evil god? The beast loomed closer. Huge, beastly features radiated an aura of ancient, wild power. A soft, rhythmic glow emanated from the mysterious flower, spreading strange light around. Within the quiet walls of the guild president's office in the city of Mycenae, the atmosphere sharply shifted to formal business. He explained the cold truth of the labyrinth. Any traveler who dies forfeits their letters and all guild property regardless of any prior wills. The president confirmed, although the guild claims ownership rights, it still allows the families of the deceased the opportunity to buy back the property. Shifting his gaze to the ledger, the visitor requested to buy back 3 specific items marked on the list. The president noted that an appraisal would determine the cost, but admitted he had never even heard of the rare artifacts requested. Nevertheless, he agreed to proceed without issue. He read through the inventory list, frowning as he noticed the absence of the Calden dagger and the Alestra bracelet, and did not understand why his master's property was disappearing. The old man explained that the bracelet is a sacred treasure, granted by the goddess Farah to the Founder King, and later passed down to the Mercilius family. He emphasized that without this sacred relic Julius Sama cannot lawfully achieve success over Lord Percival. The elder continued, noting that after the king's invitation, the head of the Mercilius family traditionally wears the bracelet to enter. He added that then the saint will take the bracelet, thereby strengthening the bond between the Founder King's bloodline and the head of the family. Losing the bracelet means losing more than just casting a shadow on reputation. He insisted it must be returned, although he admitted, the dagger can wait. He pondered the mystery for a long time and remarked, since Percival's remains were found on the 6th floor, the items must have been lost during that fatal event or after it, for their divine blessings would not have let them simply disappear. He concluded that the disappearance of the artifacts means they were lost exactly at the moment of the tragedy on the 6th floor. He pressed the guild president with questions, interrogating whether all the restored goods were truly handed in. He himself remained deeply skeptical and asserted, no ordinary thief could have stolen from him, the Lord. The president described his strict process, how they applied a lie detection spell to all 19 people involved in the transport to confirm their innocence in the former owner's death. He listened as the president reasoned. The guild pays fair compensation for returned items, so a passerby has no logical motive to steal them, effectively cutting off random opportunists. The realization struck him. It was a calculated blow against the Mercilius family. He demanded an answer on the likelihood of such a trick, sensing a malicious hand hidden deep within the labyrinth. The guild president contemplates the harsh reality. If Lord Percival truly died, the pressure to name a successor will only increase. Yet the chances of retrieving the bracelet from the labyrinth remain slim. He turns to the seasoned warrior and admits, if the legendary dragon slayer speaks about these ancient tales, it means there is a grain of truth in them. The conversation shifts to artifacts. The president says, despite flawless craftsmanship and protective seals on these items, the crystal's light has faded, so there is no trace left of their current state. A sharp realization flashes in his mind. If the items are not visible outside, it means they are still stuck deep within the labyrinth's maze, either lost or discarded by the previous owner. In the darkness rises a dark, terrifying silhouette, a minotaur, the beast that took those items for itself. The warrior presses the president against the wall for answers, his gaze sharp, and he demands to know if there is hidden knowledge about the creature. The weight of the situation hangs in the air as soon as someone utters, Minotaur. A veil of horror immediately spreads over the room. Despite the urgency, the president remains steadfast, insisting that they must wait for the results of the ongoing investigation before taking any hasty actions. He leaned forward, his face stern, and asked for permission to enter the labyrinth, explaining that they can track the artifact's location and want to first inspect the 6th floor. The guild president listened attentively, acknowledging the inherent dangers, and at the same time noted, the guild had no authority to forbid entry to the laboratory. He admitted that the possibility of treachery could not be discounted. and ultimately agreed to provide the necessary escorts and guides for the mission. With a confident smile, the veteran offered his own services, asserting that despite decades of retirement, he was capable of helping them more than enough. Deep within the fourth floor of the Sazerdom labyrinth, the warrior stood amid the scorned stone. His senses sharpened, he heard the hoarse, guttural breathing of a predator lurking nearby. Without warning, a hail of shells pierced the air with a whistle and thundered into the ground around him, exploding on impact. He barely avoided deadly blows, the earth cracked from their force as he prepared to repel the invisible attacker. A giant fireball burst toward him, but with a swift movement he deflected the scorching heat, keeping his eyes on the looming threat crawling out of the darkness. He lunged forward with dazzling speed, and his blade struck the ground with such force that the blow shattered the stone floor in an explosion of debris. When the dust settled, he stood among the ruins, his figure filled the space as he prepared to unleash another devastating strike. The target was toppled, and under the blow its defense did not hold. A wet, hoarse sound burst out, as if everything was crushed by the weight of pressure. A blazing, exquisite magical circle flared above the fallen enemy, pressing him to the ground with oppressive, radiant energy. He breathed heavily, and his focus did not waver as he continued to channel his power. The rumble of grinding stone and the crack of bones echoed throughout the room. His gaze narrowed, and a grim understanding weighed heavily on him. The opponent possessed a power that shattered conventional notions. He cast a glance at the colossal skill and realized this fighter wielded magic with a fluidity and lethality he had never seen in any mage before. Reality cut into his mind. He stood before a force of nature, a being with power that seemed boundless and at the same time terrifyingly precise. He stood amid the swirling dust. His gaze was fixed unblinkingly on the beast before him. Fangs bared a quiet, predatory, impatient readiness. Observing the creature's movements, he realized the distance between them gave a tactical chance. If he used the pause created by the beast's habit of relying on potions, the fight could be finished. He gathered strength within himself, and his hands flared with bright, focused light. With a sharp, decisive step, he rushed forward. The ground cracked under the force of his movement. He tore through the air like a flash of light and left the Minotaur stunned by his incredible speed. Midi closed the distance and maneuvered around the desperate, sweeping strike of the beast. Their gazes collided for a momentous silent confrontation of pure force and primal instinct. The Minotaur gripped his heavy axe tighter, swung with all his might, and lunged in a final, feverish attempt to strike. Without effort, he deflected the massive blade with a radiant energy barrier, leaving the beast completely exposed to a devastating counterattack. He lunged forward, his fist glowing with focused energy, and with a strike shattered the beast's last defenses. The priestess lunges forward sharply, her blade cuts a sharp arc in the air, and she enters a desperate dance of steel and fury against the beast. She slides barely on the stone floor, avoiding the deadly strike that tears the ground where she was just a moment ago. The Minotaur presses the attack, his axes strike the flickering magical barrier, humming with protective energy, forcing the priestess to find a way to respond. She directs a wave of light, but as soon as the energy breaks through, she is overwhelmed by a melancholy horror. Her magic is completely powerless against the monster, against its bare, primal mind. The beast retches forward, but its gigantic hand flies through the air unharmed. It skillfully dodges the blow and shows a mysterious ring on its finger, which seems to disrupt the very flow of magic. The side facet illuminates the ornament and catches the observer's gaze. He recognizes the artifact with sudden, cold clarity. It is the ring Alistair. Legends are told about this legacy of the Mercilius family, a relic imbued with the one absolute power capable of nullifying all magic. She freezes in disbelief, marveling at how the ring works despite the divine restrictions supposedly imposed on it, and wonders if the knight truly guards such a forbidden treasure. He stood firm and explained, "The power of the ring is intended only for the head of his family, so the thought that a stranger could take it in their hands was absurd and impossible." The beast roared, and its voice sounded confident. Only those recognized by the bloodline can command with such authority. With a thunderous strike, it slammed its massive hand into the ground, splitting the soil under its own weight. A shower of fragments scattered in all directions. The blow unleashed explosive force, and shockwaves, tearing through the surrounding space, rolled across the entire area. She pressed her hand deeper into the crater, and the earth groaned deafeningly under the incredible pressure of her assault. A sharp hiss burst out at the point of contact. It seemed the very air recoiled from the wild, uncontrollable power of the beast. Despite the devastation, the target remained motionless, and the creature was overwhelmed by a wave of rage when it realized its prey had not yet fallen. Enraged, it unleashed an unrelenting hail of blows, hammering the ground with dull, rhythmic rattlings. He let out a primal roar, and his huge hand tore the earth with furious rage. The earth cracked under the weight of his relentless pressure, and shockwaves rolled through the ruins around. Holding his breath, he froze, his eyes widened as he realized his target did not even move despite this ruin. With a sharp, threatening burst of energy, the figure rose from the debris, defying the brute force that had just struck him. A moment of genuine shock pierced his face when he saw the incredible resilience of his opponent. The air filled with darkness, dark, swirling shadows howled, thundered like thunder, and announced, "The tide of battle is changing direction." Tentacles of darkness whipped out and wrapped around him, while a voice echoed through the void, interrogating the dark pact that gave him this immortal, cursed form. The transformation was complete, and behind remained a monster, a shadow-bound entity that brazenly broke the laws of life and death. Yeah, after a brutal confrontation, the sorcerer shed his human form and emerged as a terrible, twisted creature looming over the battlefield. The beast freezes in shock. The creature spins into a fierce dark vortex, and its presence radiates an overwhelming and sinister aura. It slashes with a whip-like appendage, striking with unnatural speed and precision. The strike connects, instantly slicing the air with a sharp whistle. The beast twitches backward, stunned, staring blankly at its own hand it was cleanly cut off at the wrist. A dark viscous liquid drips from the stump as the reality of this injury finally sinks in. A filthy nastiness pierces the beast as it watches the severed limb bubbling and rotting in the cauldron. Growling from helpless irritation, the rot spreads right before its eyes. Fueled by primal rage, the creature lunged forward and, despite the pain, struck back at its tormentor. He lunged forward, putting all his remaining strength into a desperate, thunderous blow against the trembling, whipping tendrils advancing. The strike sent shockwaves through the air, but the creature did not lose form. It remained fluid, safely absorbing the force of his attack with eerie ease. With a sharp, brutal jerk, the beast was pushed back, its momentum broken, and it was forcibly rolled backward across the bare, barren ground amid laughter. Necrotic rot began to consume him, quickly spreading from the side of his wound and turning fur and flesh into a decaying mass. He held his ground, breathing heavily. His gigantic figure trembled as he looked at the mage rising in the distance. Breath came in ragged, hoarse gasps, and his gaze was fixed on the glowing, malevolent core of his opponent. Throwing his last spark of magic, he scorched the stump on his arm, and the air crackled, thick with the smell of ozone and burnt flesh. Metal fragments clinked and rhythmically fell to the ground, sounding like a firm signal. He would continue to stand in battle despite the agony. He rushes forward, his gigantic figure becoming a blur of motion as he tries to close the distance. But the magical tentacles lash out with deadly precision, intercepting his path. The beast suddenly finds its leg trapped in darkness. It entangles, coils, pulls him off balance while the sorcerer looms in the shadow. With a sharp, fierce jerk, the creature is dragged across the ground littered with debris. Several limbs strangle the sorcerer at once, squeezing him around as if tightening a noose. He strikes with a magic seal. The energy safely disperses against the sorcerer's defenses. With every second his despair grows, his current attacks are futile. Desperation forces him to act. He reaches for the hidden weapon and grips the cold, sharp steel of the specialized blade. With a roar of defiance, he directs all his remaining strength into one precise strike and drives the weapon downward to cut off the encroaching darkness. The blade sinks deep into the witch's growth, and the strike sends a wave of vibration through the ligament as the creature watches the dark limb begin to tear at the edges. The strike proves decisive, breaking the spell and tearing the sorcerer's grip. He stands victorious, firmly clutching the legendary dagger Mercilius family, a relic forged in the crucible of life and death. He tightly gripped the hilt of the Calden dagger weapon, whispered to be cursed to grant its wielder immunity to poisons, and the power to expel debilitating diseases. When the blade flashed, it granted him sacred abilities, preparing him for the upcoming clash. The dark mage, serpent-like tentacles whirled out, twisting in the air with deadly intent. He lunged forward, movements fluid and precise, as he squeezed through the advancing shadows. A bloody smile stretched across his face, baring sharp teeth as he prepared to strike back at the twisting mass of magic. A storm of speed, and he closed the distance in an instant, the ground cracking beneath his feet. He let out a guttural roar, and his gigantic fist lunged forward, catching up with the mage's defense. The impact was deafening, a thunderous explosion that sliced the air with a shockwave, causing the sorcerer to stagger in stunned, unbelieving shock. He fights against tightening bonds, his massive form straining to the limit, while dark parasitic tentacles squeeze their grip, forcing a painful wheeze from his throat. The relentless tightening continues, pulling him deeper into the abyss, as shadows entwining around his arms and legs build suffocating strength. From afar, you watch the scene and understanding dawns. The situation is rapidly spiraling out of control. At this pace, the encroaching darkness threatens to devour everything in its path. As the tentacles twitch and turn away, he watches the dagger fall, clinking against the ground, and hope for a quick escape fades. Not letting despair break him, he steals determination from within and frantically searches for a strategy to break free from this trap. His gaze is fixed firmly on the discarded weapon, the only point of focus amid the chaos, as he prepares to make one last, desperate move. Several metal canisters are scattered on the bare, dust-covered ground. Their purpose is unknown, but their very existence is ominous. The beast, driven by primal instinct, lunged forward, its massive bulk slicing through the air as it closes the distance. It strikes with stunning force. Its appendages slash in all directions, tearing and snapping to crush everything in their path. The blow is deafening, a fierce collision sending shockwaves through the nearby surroundings. A gigantic skeletal maw crashes into the ground, creating a crater with the impact relentless, propelled by pure inertia. From the center of chaos emerges a dark spherical creature, its tentacles twitching and striking outward, sharply snapping all around. The dust settles, revealing the remnants of the clash, everything scattered across the broken earth and bones. In the midst of the ruins remains a single exquisite device releasing steam and dozing in the dust. The beast recoils as a blinding, pulsating spherical glow of energy rises from the depths of the crater, its tentacles slashing outward like whips. It strikes with a huge fist, trying to crush the source of light, but the energy ripples, scorching the flesh of its hand on contact. Tendril-like tentacles coil tightly around the creature's arm, and the crack of bones echoes in the air as it squeezes with incredible force. Fighting the force that crushes it, the monster hisses, its eyes burning with primal rage as it tears its way free from the treacherous tentacles entwining it. The animal lets out a sharp, hoarse roar of agony as the tentacles bite into its body, tearing skin and sucking out blood and strength. From the last desperate surge of strength, she strikes the ground with her second fist, creating a shockwave that splits the surrounding stone. The beast is still trapped, its face twisted in a mask of defiance, and dark metallic tentacles continue to weave and coil around its limbs. Slowly, the tentacles trace through the smoke, leaving behind only the lingering scent of ozone and the silence after everything. It remains looming over the charred earth, a gigantic figure, twitching as the last remnants of its energy essence dissolve into the air. In the dust lies a lonely, crooked weapon, the only trace left of the vanished enemy. He convulsively gasps for air, his lungs burning, and he sinks even deeper into the debris of the battlefield. Comprehension overwhelms him with a devastating weight. If he did not possess such colossal strength, reinforced by his accumulated artifacts, he would surely have perished. Nearby, the scattered remains of his gear begin to softly, rhythmically glow, reacting to the magical residue still lingering in the air. He does not avert his gaze from the pile of broken equipment. The scale of destruction speaks for itself, testifying to the power of that struggle. An involuntary respect flashes in his eyes despite his reluctance. He reflects on the stubbornness of his opponents and marvels at how such seemingly trivial creatures manage to reach such heights. He extends his scarred hand toward the weapon and decides, if the previous path demands such strength, he will be ready to meet it. He looks fiercely upward, and with renewed determination declares that he is still capable of becoming stronger. His eyes narrow as he fixes his gaze on a single goal, to become more resilient and stronger than ever before. With a powerful burst of energy, he clenches his fist. The air around him trembles from the sheer force of his will. An hour later, the heavy thud of his hooves echoes through the stone corridors of Sazard and the labyrinth as he descends to the first floor. He freezes and stares into the distant, dazzling light at the end of the passage, feeling, this is the goal the blade that challenged him once tried to reach. The question lingers in his mind as he approaches the glow. Is it true that the answer to his eternal quest lies beyond the threshold? He takes a step forward, his silhouette swallowed by the blinding, all-consuming radiance of the exit. Emerging from the depths, he finds himself under the vast open sky. Now he stands before a bustling city, unaware that an even deadlier battle against far more terrifying enemies lies ahead. During the day, the town flourishes. Merchants and adventurers mingle on the crowded market streets. Nearby, simple joys of life continue. An elderly man tends his shop and children run and play in the street, oblivious to the looming threat. In a quiet corner, a mother holds a sleeping infant to her chest, a moment of tender peace amid the daily hustle. Deep beneath the surface, a beast lies, eyes closed, in a moment of silence before the inevitable. The creature rises, heavy steps echo dully off the stone walls, and it heads toward the light of the exit. An insatiable thirst for power drives the transformation, shaping the being into an undeniable monster. Deep in the labyrinth of Sazardine, on the first floor, the monster's scenarios were sharply focused on the path ahead. It steps forward, breaking the silence, wondering if the light at the end of the corridor truly holds the prey it came for. A huge monster looms over a small, solitary figure, casting a shadow that devours the distance between them. He stands like a pillar, gripping a short blade with trembling hands, his breath ragged and heavy. The beast watches, confused by how the trembling, pitiful little one dares to challenge it. Suddenly bursting into speed, he lunges forward and the monster mocks his futility, claiming he won't even scratch its height. He meets the gaze, fierce, unwavering eyes, and does not let fear crush him under the force looming above. The little traveler's gaze sharply widens. Within it is a single, desperate focus as he lunges forward. He drives the blade into the beast with a primal roar. The strike slices the air so sharply that a shockwave flies through it. The monster twitches and staggers. It is stunned by the sudden, precise strike that pierced its hide. Despite the successful hit, the mood of the fight breaks him. He collapses and falls onto the stone floor, while the giant creature towers over him, breathing heavily. After a wave of violence, he falls into a deep, unconscious sleep, breathing steady, though his body is completely covered in wounds. The beast watches him intently, not understanding how his opponent can sleep calmly in the very heart of the clash, where life and death walk side by side. It contemplates the nature of its prey. Creatures with such weakness usually flee, but this one has decided to stand and fight. The monster examines the wound on its own flesh, and cannot comprehend how such a slow, crude weapon could have caused it any harm at all. Understanding comes to the beast as it watches the fallen youth closely. It recognizes in him a truly stubborn spirit, and this leaves it powerless, unable to comprehend the very encounter. He looks down at the fallen youth and recognizes in those wide-open, defiant eyes the same fierce spirit that seeks to find its own past. The beast looks at the unconscious traveler and realizes, this small, broken figure reflects the person he once was. He notices how the boy lacks skill and even proper weapons, but understands, the crucible of battle will inevitably forge something much stronger from him. With a heavy, deliberate movement, he kneels before the boy, his gigantic figure casting a long shadow over the small, motionless body. He whispers a silent command into the air, urging the boy to grow strong and overcome his current fragility. A vision of the future flickers in his mind, a promise of growth that goes beyond their present encounter. A predatory, radiant smile spreads across his face as he imagines the day when this boy will return a worthy opponent to challenge him. The boy remains lost in a dream, unaware that the monster has already marked him, so that one day he will stand among the greatest warriors. He stood at the threshold, and determination grew stronger as he vowed to become stronger by their next meeting. The beast's eyes narrowed, a quiet, predatory focus lingered for a moment on the road ahead. Beyond the wild desert appeared the stone stairs of Sazard and Labyrinth, and this signaled the arrival of a new company. The squad disembarked, and their leader gave orders to systematically scour the lower floors in search of the seal magician and the stolen artifact that had disappeared. He ordered the young prince to stay behind, guaranteeing his safety while the others prepared to descend. A conversation flared among the companions, and they caught an unexpected revelation. Their guide was once a high-ranking adventurer. He reviewed his history and admitted he once lived only for strength to honor the blessings of his clan. When pressured for more, he fell silent, reserved, focused, deciding to bury the deeper secrets of his past even further. The bearded warrior stood before the entrance, his gaze fixed on the road ahead while his comrades gathered behind. He watched as a small, beaten boy emerged from the shadows, tightly clutching a mysterious object in his hand. Surprise rippled through the group. They sharpened their questions. Why was a child here in such a dangerous place? Their eyes fell on the artifact he held. The object, a metal strip with ancient signs, caught the light and revealed its weight to those who knew the secrets of the labyrinth. Due to the sudden appearance of the boy, the party halted their advance and, surrounding the youth, began to scrutinize the situation. Bearded warrior stepped forward and loomed over the child as soon as he introduced himself as Panya Laban, then demanded to know the boy's name. He raised his gaze, holding the giant's stare evenly and calmly, and simply replied that his name was Panzel. While tension hung in the air, the group pressed him for an answer about the origin of the armband. They were intrigued. Despite the formidable presence of the veteran adventurer, the boy showed no fear. He calmly but firmly explained his appearance. 3 days ago, he sneaked onto the first floor of the labyrinth, driven by a desperate need to earn copper coins for his sick mother, and has not yet abandoned his determination to succeed. The elder explains, amateurs can still survive the first floor, but spiny rats are a deadly threat to those who lose focus. They spring from their places, attack in packs, and gnaw until the terrified are eaten alive. He continues, noting, the boy's survival for 3 days is no accident. He has already demonstrated the disciplined hostility of an experienced traveler. The boy recounts his experience, how he killed 2 spiny rats and collected their copper coins until something else stopped him. He describes the creature that appeared, a gigantic muscular beast covered in fur with cow-like horns. When he asks if it was a minotaur, the elder's facial expression changes to pure shock and complete disbelief. The elder quickly recovers and asks to immediately return to the guild to confirm the situation. He presses the boy, forcing him to continue the story, and demands an explanation of what happened after he encountered the beast. The boy admits, fearing for his life, he prepared a knife and, acting impulsively, jumped on the minotaur. He confirmed that after the fight he really lost consciousness, explaining, his small stature allowed him to reach only the beast's leg before darkness covered him. Continuing the story, he described how he woke up and saw the monster was already gone. Only his knife remained and a mysterious, seemingly expensive bracelet, which he was now holding in his hand. The priestess froze in thought and noted, the minotaur probably left the items deliberately, but the reason for such a gesture remained a mystery. The elder acknowledged the tradition that the labyrinth's finds belonged to the one who discovered them, yet cautiously inquired whether the young man would agree to give up the artifact. He said that the bracelet is a revered family treasure that belonged to the boy's father, and hoped to touch his sense of empathy. Then the elder offered a fair price for the item and held his breath, waiting to see how the boy would react to the offer. She silently nodded when he asked for confirmation, and his gaze slid over her eyes to be sure of the truthfulness of the words about his father's inheritance. He looked down at the metal band and said that money did not interest him, and he would return the relic to where it belonged. He firmly stuck to his decision, brushing off their protests about the prize briefly and decisively, with a single refusal. His face softened as he explained. For his father's most precious thing, the tragedy is to end up in the hands of strangers. The elder looked at him, and in that gaze appeared a new respect. He silently acknowledged the noble character of the young man. With a bright, grateful smile, the noble introduced himself as Julius and sincerely thanked for the selfless deed. He replied with a quiet, modest nod, and his gentle nature did not change at all from the praise. The elder's attention again turned to the very mystery they allowed guessed, where the formidable beast had gone. The heavyweight warrior rushed full speed through the dense forest, and his breathing broke into ragged, desperate gasps. He burst out in a cry of despair and demanded to know if his partner was trying to lead him to early-grade submission. He wiped his brow and laughed, brushing off the accident, and even teased his comrade for reckless fire magic. It had almost set him on fire. The tension changed when they realized they were surrounded, but he did not lose his course. He only insisted that their unity would lead them through the danger. They quickly raced through the streets, a group of adventurers paving the way forward with focused determination. Later the mood lifted when they gathered around the campfire, shared stories, and laughed, and for a moment the weight of their journey receded. A playful challenge arose spontaneously. The company agreed that whoever lost the arm wrestling would treat everyone to drinks. While the fight continued with chatter, a deeper thought arose. If you looked at everything through the eyes of those monsters they hunted, it turned out the true monsters were humans. Bearded warrior gasped for air, his face twisted from exhaustion and growing fury, as he struggled with all his might not to fall behind. He laughed sharply, mocking the naivety of his companion, his voice stumbling with contempt for their idealism. He watched as the woman stretched out her hand, her face boldly smiling as she mocked his lack of human company and deliberately addressed him as Logan. Breathless and exhausted, he stood before the entrance to the Adventurers Guild, and in his heavy, ragged breaths his fatigue was visible. His eyes, marked by the lines of a long and hard life, reflected a deep, lingering sadness as he stared motionless into the distance. In the quiet room lay a flawless flower, alone a silent reminder of the name he had just heard, spoken in a whisper. In the deep shadows hung enormous curved horns of the monster, silently revealing its presence in the darkness. The monster gazed into the dazzling light pouring from the labyrinth's exit, thoughtfully weighing the world beyond the stone walls. Blocking the way, the small traveler froze in a pose back straight, gaze fixed and unwavering, as if guarding something valuable hidden just beyond sight. Then he understood. The space beyond the exit was not a battlefield, but a sanctuary that needed protection. He pondered the nature of his ascent. The higher he went, the weaker his opponents became, and it remained only to guess where his true trial lay. His gaze narrowed, focusing on the path ahead, and a new resolve hardened within him. Stone stairs stretched down into the suffocating darkness, a silent invitation into the very depths. A sudden thought struck him in the head. The battle he longed for was not above, it was deep underground, waiting in the abyss. He stood before the formidable guardian of the lower levels. Muscles tensed, ready to lunge, and he was certain the final test of his strength awaited just below. From his chest burst a primal, deafening roar. The dull stone corridors of the 30th floor echoed as he claimed his rights to the territory. With the fierce power of his massive axes, he chopped the air, and rage erupted in a whirlwind of destruction. Although the direct threat from above was quelled, the beast descended into the darkness, doomed to grow into a force even mightier. Besides simple treasures, defeating the floor boss from the 11th level and below grants the adventurer access to rare, coveted items. These unique gifts drop skills provide specialized advantages, from magic absorption to enhanced perception, allowing travelers to surpass their natural limits. The monster encountered in the very depths was no exception to this rule. After its fall, the 50th floor boss, a lizardman, acquired a rare skimmer with fresh blood and a warrior's defense skill. After that, the ram-headed bear of the 55th floor was defeated, granting its victor the charge skill. During the same clash, trophies included a rare bastard sword and various potions squeezed out after the encounter with the adventurer squad. The massacre continued. The crimson praying woman from the 60th floor renounced the rare sickle-shaped sword, and from the 62nd floor a ghost disappeared, leaving behind a burning breath from the skill. Although his level did not change, the endless cycle of battles and gaining these powers forced the Minotaur to relentlessly and rapidly increase his strength. He crouches in the shadows, and his thoughts are consumed by the primal hunting cycle. Looting, attack, devouring, killing. A few moments later, as soon as the thousand-eyed ghost fell, silence in the boss hall on the 62nd floor heavily settled over the labyrinth. The armored knight prepares for the clash. The rhythmic clinking of his gauntlets echoes off the stone floor as he pulls on his gear. He tightly grips his shield. The polished surface gleams in the dim light as he steals determination from himself. The beast watches the invaders, and the cold, deliberate gaze shows. His assessment of their minds regarding understanding his non-aggression pact is quite accurate. Shulkwal Kurganos, a seasoned A-class knight, stands at the head of his unit, and his gaze is fixed on the target ahead. A woman wearing a veil mask speaks and confirms. The creature responsible for Lord Percival's death is the very one standing before them, and this is evident from the resonance coming from Carden's dagger. He clenches his jaws. The revelation presses on him as he realizes he cannot simply accept this. She stood firm, ordering her subordinates to retreat and prioritize the safety of the scout, and the mage despite the reckless urge to rush at the greater threat herself. With a heavy thud, she drove her massive shield plate into the dungeon floor, and the barrier became impassable. They froze in tense silence, holding their breath while the beast prepared to unleash its fury. A thunderous battle cry burst from the creature. The traditional Kurgano prayer was meant to frighten enemies and at the same time empower the beast itself. The air grew heavy as the Minotaur unleashed a howl skill that shattered physical strength and bound movements with its incredible enhanced power. He lunged forward, but she was ready. She withstood the blow only thanks to her own courage, without any fear. The strike shook the very foundations of the room, but her shield held despite the devastating force of the attack. When the echo of clashing steel faded, the beast erupted in rage and roared in frustration. It still could not move the knight that stood immovable, no matter how many blows it struck. She stands firm, recognizing in the equipment she holds the Vandessa shield. It is not just a talisman, a masterpiece forged by the legendary mage Arkal Vandessa, who poured his own soul into its creation to define the pinnacle of defensive technology. The Kurganos clan passed this relic down to descendants through generations, using its incredible weight and thickness to withstand the onslaught of demonic beasts and protect their lands. With the shield raised, she takes a stance. Preparing for the colossal axe of the Minotaur, he lunges at her, and the blow shatters bones with incredible force. The strike echoes with a dull metallic ring if she does not yield an inch of ground. She holds firm, her boots dig into the earth to throw the predator off balance. Suddenly she lunges forward sharply, and with a bloody strike drives her weapon into the body of the Minotaur. The beast shudders from shock as she relentlessly covers him with attacks, turning the tide of the battle thanks to flawless defense and precise counterattacks. She felt the large hand of the beast clutch her shield, and the grip's strength threatened to break her defense. From the side, the spectators froze and shouted in alarm as the Minotaur caught her, abruptly pulling the heavy gear with primal fury. Fighting panic, she gasped from tension and, pushing the shield forward with all her might, tore the creature's grip and regained her footing. Firmly landing with a thud, she gripped the hilt tighter, and with a thunderous strike drove the shield into the Minotaur. The beast staggered and recoiled. The warrior knight slides across the stone floor. His shield absorbs the blow while the beast roars in impotent frustration. The observers froze in admiration. The Kurganos clan forged their combat arts in surface skirmishes, surpassing the limits of simple measures levels of labyrinths or classes. He becomes a support, staring motionless as the massive creature slowly rises to full height, its gaze fixed firmly on his armored body. The beast acknowledges his skill, frankly stating that his physical strength and fighting spirit rival monsters from the deepest floors. Her eyes narrow a predatory gleam and she makes it clear, the real trial is just beginning. He reflects on the essence of battle. Humans are inherently vulnerable, but can surpass their limits through tactics and skill and become true warriors capable of defeating even the most powerful ogres. Exhaling evenly, he proclaims his goal. He came to challenge the Minotaur to prove that his mentor, Percival, could not be defeated by just some monster. His eyes hardened under the helmet when he realized the rumors about his mentor's defeat were just lies. He stands firm while a giant beast looms over him. Its roar shakes the very foundations of the labyrinth. The knight blocks the devastating blow with his shield. Steel rings against steel, and he decides to end the clash in this exchange. He watches intently as a small cylindrical object rolls across the floor, and the hilt of his weapon tightens in anticipation. Suddenly, the object detonates right against his armor. The impact throws sparks in all directions, but he does not give up. He is confident in the invincibility of his reinforced defenses and immediately understands the nature of the attack, believing they will easily withstand the explosive force. Before he can recover, a sharp curved blade pierces the edge of his shield, hooking with a sudden, furious force. He recognizes the weapon as a rare drop from Crimson Mantis, and this realization momentarily throws him off balance while the enemy prepares to strike. With a powerful jerk, the attacker rips the shield from his hands, leaving him exposed and defenseless. It was hard for him to stay on his feet. A hail of explosive blows battered the armor so much that he had to whimper through the pain. The beast lunged forward, its claws dug firmly into the shield, and with bloody determination would not let go. The creature snatched the shield from his hands with a rough jerk, and he was left exposed. He froze in shock when the shield was knocked away, but quickly recovered, and waving his blade, struck in a desperate counterattack. The blade rang sharply into the monster's hide. The force of the collision cracked his weapon, and he staggered back as the Minotaur delivered a devastating blow straight to the abdomen. Despite the brutal attack, he still stands, His armor, forged from molten dragon scales, deflects the heaviest blows. The beast took a deep breath, preparing a destructive howl, and a scream burst from the people's eyes. The fear of inevitable danger already loomed. He clenched his broken blade, gathered his strength, and decided to endure the onslaught to deliver one last decisive strike. He pulled himself together as the beast broke free. A deafening, burning roar tore the silence, and the wave of its power threatened to shatter his resolve. Staggering back, he gasped in disbelief. This creature had not only raw strength, it also could unleash scorching breath, an ability he never expected. Suddenly it dawned on him, the monster could absorb the skills of those it killed. The blow turned everything in his head upside down. A cry of alarm broke out from a nearby observer who watched in horror as the knight was pushed to the very edge. He was pressed into the ground. The earth cracked beneath him as the minotaur pressed on with relentless assault. To the rhythmic metallic clang, the beast began hammering his defense. Each strike sounded with the weight of inevitable doom. The truth became indisputable. The very same force that once glorified the life of Sir Percival now bore down on him. He did not take his eyes off the shield, already torn to shreds and cracked under pressure, and understood. Before him was not just a monster. It was a predator that had evolved, growing itself on the stolen power of heroes. With growing horror, he realizes, the monster before him is not just a beast, but an imitator of the combat mastery of martial, capable of absorbing the very skills of those it kills. The creature bursts into a deafening, primal roar that shakes the very foundations of the labyrinth. With a disgusting crunch, the minotaur crashes down with all its mass, breaking the opponent's defense in a display of overwhelming strength. Beyond him, his companions watch in horror as their leader chokes and becomes powerless. One cries out in despair, begging for forgiveness, while another panics and pushes the group back. Retreat before they all meet the same fate. Clenching his teeth, the soldier reaches through the agony of what is happening and fights against the order to abandon his post. He knows. Above all, he must care for the safety of the seal magician and the scout. The beast freezes, its eyes narrow, and a faint, eerie glow begins to emanate from its body, a sign that the stolen technique is activating. Standing amid the ruins of broken shields and discarded metal, the monster looms over the battlefield. Its presence radiates a terrible, newly acquired power. Its gaze twitches cold, calculated, and fixes on the next target with a predatory intent. Under the weight of the approaching strike of the creature, the ground trembles, and the stolen shield hums with deadly, vibrating energy. The beast stands amid the haze of flickering light in the boss's room on the 63rd floor, and its presence radiates a cold, precise threat. She surveys the chamber and sees. The adventurers from the 62nd floor have retreated, so the path is clear for the next encounter. Neglecting the temptation of material trophies, the creature focuses on a single goal and knows about rumors that the guild president's belongings have been stolen from it. A new threat emerges from the shadows. Azel Reed, a level 60 mage class A who carries a heavy burden. He is the father of a former enemy. A young woman stands amid a swirling downpour of papers, her face showing deep shock and complete disbelief. She cries out in agony, asking why she is still unnoticed. Nearby, a man brushes off the best marks of the Magic Academy, claiming they are worthless. He grips a specialized device, his gaze cold and focused. The team coordinates the final preparations. They entrust the speed buff to Sarmeth, while August prepares to cast defense reinforcement and health regeneration. They stand at the threshold of the level 63 boss room, feeling the beast approaching. With a firm grip on his weapon, he confirms that all preparations are complete, noting that the squad consists entirely of experienced class adventurers. He stares ahead intently with grim determination. His breath falters as he declares, the time to kill the beast has finally come. The hardened killer crosses his blades, his eyes fixed unwaveringly on the monster, and he freezes before the strike, coldly, precisely like revenge. They tear through stone corridors, their footsteps rhythmically echoing dully on the floor until they close the distance to the prey. The giant creature lunges forward with a roar, but the travelers are already ready, meeting its fury with a powerful, coordinated counterattack. He maintains focus as the giant beast's axe crashes into his protective barrier. The impact thunders through the entire chamber. His allies freeze in awe as the monster involuntarily stumbles and slides back, its advance completely disrupted by the power of his magical defense. With a sharp command, he releases a frost spell, and in an instant, torn eyes descend and instantly bind the creature, tying its limbs. The beast struggles against the icy chains. Its gigantic body is bound by frost, and magical bonds of titans entwine its hide. Under pressure, the monster grows and tries to break free, but the magical ice holds firm. It cracks and groans, bending under colossal load. Watching the screen, his companion notes, such a level of magic usually requires long spells, but he bypassed this, having prepared circles in advance. This is proof of his skill. The strategist acknowledges his skill, calling him an expert in high-speed magic, the key to their current stalemate. He signals the next phase of the attack, calling him to strike while the monster is still immobilized. He channels his power into a divine spell, summoning a barrage of scorching rays that crash onto the trapped monster, forcing it to bear the full weight of their judgment. He does not look away until the magical construct enveloping the beast begins to strengthen. The spells press harder and harder, and rhythmic, muffled blows roll wave after wave. Seeing the approaching surge of power, the priestess shouts to her companions, warning, "Hide until the area is engulfed by flames." With a cold-blooded final command, he unleashes his majestic magic, his eyes burning with the intent to erase the target from the face of the earth. The very air screams as the sentence of agony arrives, a vortex of raw energy tears toward the monster's trap. Under relentless pressure, the beast's icy prison cracks fissures spread lightning fast until the entire structure shatters into 1,000 fragments. At the center of the battlefield, a giant burst of light and power explodes, slicing the ground with a wave, and forcing the adventurers to rise against the shockwave. When the dust begins to settle, the party notices a direct hit and cautious optimism rises among them, for they understand that their coordinated strike truly worked. He looks at the aftermath with a grim expression, and his inner thoughts reveal a deep lack of respect for the creature he just dismantled. He remembered her last wish, a simple dream of a quiet life, far away from the violence of the battlefield. With a heavy heart, he whispered a promise to her memory, declaring that her revenge had finally been secured. Beneath them, the earth began to tremble wildly. Even the earth itself reacted to the consequences of the colossal magical discharge. Nearby, the travelers exchanged grim remarks, guessing what the war would leave behind, while simultaneously acknowledging that the master could finally find peace. The trembling intensified a low, steady rumble that said something was stirring in the dissipating smoke. Through the haze emerged a huge, ornate shield. It stubbornly stood immovable against the destruction that was supposed to erase everything in its path. Behind the impenetrable barrier, eyes flared primal rage, and the beast was still alive, rusting and roaring in open defiance. Shock rippled through the group as they realized their most powerful strike had missed, and the monster's impossibility to survive paralyzed them. The mage user watches intently as the battlefield explodes with a blinding flash. The force of the strike shatters the defense of his allies. He sees the beast tearing forward with a deafening roar, its gigantic form crashing down on the warriors with relentless, unyielding, devastating blows. The creature swings a heavy axe with terrifying speed, forcing the armored knight to brace for the blow as the ground trembles beneath them. Under relentless pressure, the knight shield slices through the air, momentarily exposing itself to the monster's furious rage. In despair, the warrior tries to break through the chaos, but the beast anticipates the move, striking the ground with bone-crushing force. Seeing the catastrophic state, the mage user shouts orders to his comrades, demanding they pour all their remaining strength into one last desperate protective barrier. The monster continues its merciless assault. Heavy steps thunder like thunder as it prepares to deliver the final blow. They stand firm, weaving their magic together to manifest the great wall, a shimmering dome of energy trembling under the weight of the beast's assault. He remained focused, ignoring the taunt's physical blows were useless against the shimmering great wall barrier. A sharp, fierce exhale and the beast unleashed a torrent of energy, crashing directly into the protective dome. The strike sliced through the air. The defenders collapsed as their protective shell crumbled to nothing. In the icy silence among the ruins, he dragged his broken body across the floor, and his weapon clanged uselessly and rolled aside while the monster stretched into the distance. He gasped for air, steam rising from his exhausted body, as the creature watched him with predatory, patient vigilance. His fingers scraped the stone, frantically searching for a grip as he tried to get up again. Clenching his teeth, he stared ahead, a gaze of complete, unwavering defiance. The beast took a deep breath, confident of its victory, and watched as the lone figure disappeared into the shadow of the corridor. He stood among the ruins and thoughtfully watched the battle. Usually, he would have fallen as soon as he stepped over the threshold of this room, but the perfectly prepared trap and the devastating blow guaranteed him victory. The beast realized the heavy shield in the opponent's hands was the true key to his victory and acknowledged that the outcome depended on it. A predatory snarl spread across his face as he contemplated the trophy just won. He pondered if he did not bring back something valuable, his efforts would be completely in vain. The monster loomed over the fallen mage, his gigantic figure cast a shadow over the tiles, throwing a threat across the entire floor. The mage user fought with an invisible force. His voice broke as he realized his body was completely paralyzed, not even a finger could move. He looked coldly and intently as his victim desperately tried to crawl away, and the rustle of movements echoed dully throughout the chamber. With heavy, deliberate steps, he closed the distance, his gaze fixed on the frightened mage who too late understood. There was nowhere to run, and inevitable death was already catching up. He brought down the heavy axe with a devastating blow. It struck so hard that the ground beneath the opponent shattered into fragments. The beast froze, heavy breathing echoing, as he pulled a decorated shield from the debris, his gaze fixed on that shining surface. A strange realization overwhelmed him. He recalled a flash of uncharacteristic anger he felt when the thief reached for the artifact, and now he could not understand his own reaction. His gaze narrowed as he carefully examined the intricate patterns engraved in the metal. searching for the source of power that stirred such deeply rooted feelings within him. He stood upright, the heavy shield in his hand kept him grounded, as he tried to comprehend the sudden, unfamiliar feeling of fear that gripped his heart. His teeth clenched, a low, guttural sound vibrated through his jaw as he tried to process these new, painfully revealed vulnerabilities. He grinds harder, and his determination strengthens. He cast aside confusion to fully focus on the object of his obsession. With a final, decisive motion, he drove the shield back into the ground. The impact echoed with a wave of energy that swept through the chamber. He strikes the ground relentlessly. The metallic clinking spreads throughout the chamber as he questions his own identity. His thoughts reach toward the shield. He wonders whether it truly grants power or merely offers a deceptive sense of security as he contemplates the very nature of the sword he holds. Suddenly, a thought illuminates him. By using such tools, you doom yourself to constant anxiety, the fear of loss. He stubbornly rejects the empty life that begins with this. With a sharp final movement, he throws the weapon away. The clang of the strike against the floor marks his break from dependence. The blade spins on the stone and comes to a stop as he stands light, without the burden on his shoulders. He rejects the coward's path. His gaze hardens as he tears off the crutch of external armaments. He concludes that hiding behind a tree is only an appearance, and true strength lies in the ability to withstand any attack without these fragile shelters. Clenching his fist, he stubbornly chooses a new path, the way to his own absolute power. With furious strength, he strikes the stone floor with his fist, and the ground beneath him cracks and splits open. The blow sends shock waves through the labyrinth and tiles. His fists turn white from tension, clenched with all the excitement of his result. Gritting his teeth, he transforms his own rage into a single burning goal. He stands up to his full height. His gigantic figure casts a shadow on the ruins he himself has made. One single thought devours him: he must descend even deeper into the abyss. His eyes flare with primal thirst as he vows to find stronger enemies and an even deadlier fight. Turning away from the ruins, he decisively strides forward, leaving behind a broken floor as he plunges into unknown depths. Several months pass, and the deep, silent corridors of the labyrinth remain untouched, except perhaps by the flow of time. In the depths of the core, on the 100th level, on the lowest floor, hellish heat blazed, marking the territory of the boss room. The king of the labyrinth emerged, a natural force that crushed everything in its path like a wildfire, leaving only conquest in its wake. He broke out with a deafening roar. His gigantic figure surged forward, as if a whole raw, uncontrollable force stirred within him as he prepared to unleash his fury. The beast's jaw opened, a primal roar echoed through the stone halls as he proclaimed his dominion over the abyss. Above the underground chaos, the capital Ledophilis stood high within the kingdom of Bardmost, seemingly indifferent to the looming threat. Within the grounds of the ruling family's mansion in Merculius, the atmosphere remained disciplined and orderly, a sharp contrast to the wild depths below. Two young apprentices honed their fencing with full concentration, their movements sharp and synchronized as they polished their skills before the trials that awaited ahead. He finishes the training, signaling the end of the day's intense exercises for the young traveler. From a distance, the elder sees the boy has become a support for him by his presence, and this helped soothe the longing of the young lord that still lingered. The conversation shifts to the boy's potential. The elder says he wants to forge him into a loyal vassal for Lord Julius, pointing to his impressive mastery of swordsmanship. For a moment, curiosity flashes across the warrior's face, as he asks the elder's suddenly a painfully bright interest in you. The boy, unaware of the watchful gaze, recalls the advice he received and realizes it was this very knight who first led him on this path. For now, the conversation moves to darker matters, confirming that the official report of the knight's death was accepted, and the public version was adjusted to cite illness. They agree, although rumors may not subside, the transfer of power to Lord Julius will proceed without disruption under protection from interference by rival noble houses. The elder presses the warrior with his gaze, squeezing an answer out of him, asking if hesitation still lives within him regarding the dangerous order to kill the Minotaur. He stood before the assembly, holding the royal decree that bypassed the guild's authority and obligated the taming of the beast responsible for the death of Master Jilinx. The warrior inquired about the nature of this reward, and his companion dismissed material gain, noting that the true weight of the request lay in the consequences of confirming the master's death. He silently looked with a grim expression, and insisted that the stakes were too high for a figure of such scale to be turned into an ordinary target for monster hunting. Suspicion grew in his eyes as he pondered the king's true intentions, and wondered if the hunt for the Minotaur was merely a pretext to uncover the truth about the Lord's safety. He turned to the guild president and asked him to listen carefully, while he prepared to reveal a story that sounded more like a fairy tale than the cold reality of the kingdom. The story began with the royal lineage. The queen and her daughter were cast into the depths of the palace to protect them from the shifting tides of court politics. He continued, recounting how the current king inherited from his father a secret affection for the princess. Despite a show of disdain before the people, he held on to one thing to protect her. The revelation reached its peak when he told of a remarkable meeting through which the king fell in love with his own half-sister, and the listener was stunned by the weight of this secret. He sat in silence, contemplating the revelation. The king was shocked to learn who his lover was, a young noble whose courage and refinement had won the monarch's complete trust. The monarch's heart swelled with joy as the youth, unaware of the true nature of how his beloved was connected to the crown, knelt before him to humbly ask for her hand in marriage. Seeking to keep the feeling secret, the king ensured the couple stayed away from the royal family. Even when they met his son, Julius, he arranged for the mother to marry under a different name to protect her from the truth. The glorification of his existence became a single goal: to protect the happiness of his beloved sister. Because of this, the king, as soon as he learned that the monster had taken the life of his brother-in-law, began a secret investigation, a tragedy that surely broke his sister. The loss left his sister a widow and her young son fatherless. This was exactly what the king desperately tried to avoid. The beast that took that soul became the king's fiercest enemy. Unable to openly avenge the simple nobleman and without revealing his secrets, he issued an order to hunt the monster under the guise of searching for the missing hero, officially recording the death as an ordinary illness. He long weighed the harsh truth. He understood that the colossal reward was never meant to feed the state. Instead, it was meant to fuel a single burning revenge. Turning his gaze to his companion, he sharply questioned where the beastman had come from and demanded clarity on what the Minotaur really was. Another man closed his eyes, and his face became stone-like. He simply repeated this feeling of uncertainty. He looked into the expanse of the landscape and thought, some events go beyond human understanding. Yet from our limited perspective, the majestic design remains forever hidden. With a collected, firm gaze, he decided, under whatever circumstances, their only way forward was to give everything they had. The elder man slowly nodded, finding in the philosophy of endurance a grim, forced coincidence. Their conversation was interrupted by a young traveler who approached cautiously, and with hope sought an audience with the nobleman. The young man stood before them, his eyes burning with curiosity, and directly asked about the main difference between a battle hammer and a sword. He explained, unlike the sword, the battle hammer relies not on refined technique, but on the devastating, pure strength of the one who wields it. The young traveler lowered his head and repeated the same statement with a skeptical, inquisitive tone that involuntarily provoked a reaction from the warrior. Snapping his knuckles sharply, the veteran challenged his companion and offered to demonstrate the true power of the weapon. The youth's eyes flashed with wild excitement, and his fiery statement momentarily threw the older man off balance. Sighing resignedly, the warrior turned to the servant, who reminded him that fulfilling the young lord's wish was his main duty. He looked at the boy, a rare, determined smile spread across his face, as he admitted that he had long awaited the chance to test his strength against him. The boy shone, his face filled with eager anticipation before the upcoming trial. Time passed, and in a few days the stage for their meeting was already prepared. He stood among the gathered crowd of travelers, their voices rising in a low, even hum of expectation. All attention in the hall shifted to the central bulletin board, where a new, grim wanted prize appeared. It was a call to arms against the Minotaur, a unique threat lurking on the 62nd floor. It was marked as an A-class danger with a staggering reward fund of 15 million. Looking at the announcement, the experienced warriors exchanged sharp glances and grim smiles. Each felt how difficult this challenge would be. A heavy silence hung over the group, and the reality of the hunt began to sink into their awareness. The tension was broken by the sharp metallic clang of a heavy axe striking the ground. Behind the axe, a spiked hammer and a heavy spear hit the floor one after another, as if throwing down a challenge. The heap of discarded, broken weapons was scattered around, evidence of the brutal trials, awaiting anyone who dared to challenge the king of the labyrinth. He stands in the silence of the deep labyrinth, and his massive blade strikes the stone floor with a heavy, dull thud. With a sharp, smooth motion, he begins swinging the heavy steel. The air whistles as the blade cuts through the darkness. An impulse pushes him forward. Powerful muscles ripple in waves as he executes a precise, sweeping arc. He accelerates the rotation. The weapon becomes a blurred, bloody circle, full of deadly intent. The speed increases until he becomes a whirlwind of steel. The very force of his training creates a vacuum in the stagnant air. He heavily holds his breath and, gazing at his path to the lowest floor, catches a pause. Monsters no longer satisfy his hunger. Only a specific form of prey can quench his burning thirst. His eyes narrow as he fixes his gaze on the distant outlines of a worthy trial. With terrible certainty, he understands. The power he seeks he can test only among peepleather, where he will have to find it. He stood among shifting stones, and his determination grew stronger as soon as he realized the opponent he so longed to find was already waiting for him. Beneath his feet, the floor began to boil and bubble, a rhythmic glitch signaling the birth of new life from the depths of the labyrinth. Monsters wildly poured forward like water from a spring, growing directly from the walls and floor, not from flesh, but from the very essence of the dungeon. He watched the cycle repeat, knowing, as soon as these creatures are defeated, the labyrinth will inevitably give birth to them again over time. He froze on the lowest floor and did not avert his gaze, convinced. If he waits here, he will eventually lure out the mighty human warrior he had seen. The hunger for power drives him. He understood. He must hone his skills and master the art of combat to reach his goal. And a predatory smile spread across his face as he awaited that inevitable moment greedily, to savor the challenge to the end. He shifted his gaze to the metal dragon before him, noting, after its 100th defeat the creature will no longer respawn, and this meant the end of his current training. He finally mastered the very deep sand. Even the stone walls seemed to acknowledge him as the new master of the labyrinth. 12 years have passed since the world last received a new installment. The landscape is still scarred, but life clings in the shadow of the great labyrinth. Adventurers gather in the square, not taking their eyes off the quest board, each striving for glory and the clink of coins. The bounty announcement hangs in the air. It details the threat of the Minotaur, the formidable boss of the 100th floor. In the local armory, a young woman meets visitors, offering equipment to those who dared to venture into the depths. She recalls recent news, and the client freezes on the spot upon learning that an entire group was completely wiped out. The details are brutal. 72 individuals, including knights and healers, were sent to subdue the beast and all vanished into the darkness. One observer tells of the harsh reality. Nobles used these mass parties to wear down the boss, sacrificing countless lives for prestige. A young traveler snorts disdainfully, unable to hide his disgust at the arrogance of those who claim glory for subduing the metal dragon, even the young lord who merely watched from the sidelines. He asks if they tried the same treacherous tactics again, and if they met their end in the process. A veteran across the table confirms his suspicion. The first party entered the boss's room, and it was completely wiped off the face of the earth by the creature's fiery breath. Confused, the young ones asked why they were so poorly prepared, whether they lacked the necessary protective magic. The veteran explains that their equipment was purely for physical attacks, so in case of unexpected anomalous battle conditions, they were left completely defenseless. He adds that the slaughter happened just outside the boss's room, while the commander was leisurely reading a speech to the next party in line. The young traveler chokes on his food from shock, realizing the Minotaur has come out from the boss and ambushed the team just as the commander planned. The veteran remains cold, brushing off the youth's protest, saying the strategy is too cruel, and emphasizes, after 12 years, everyone should have known that the beast is capable of breaking out of its lair. He continued the grim account, noting, as soon as the Minotaur dealt with the second batch at the commander's side, it charged straight toward the nearest troop camp, a fact well known to those who kept their finger on the pulse. The beast's tactical precision was terrifying. It systematically eliminated teleporters and healers before smashing the barrier artifacts that kept wandering monsters at bay, and unleashed a pack of basilisks and hydras into the fight. In a moment, the camp collapsed into a hellish scene of screams and slaughter, as the knights were trampled by a crowding horde advancing ever further. The only survivor, a non-combatant turned witness, a non-fighter accountant, was pulled out by a guild squad sent to investigate the loss of contact, and he recounted the entire truly horrifying whirlwind to the guild manager, Yaduar. They mocked the pride of those troops, comparing their pitiful play to the pure, relentless, and devastating power of the two-horned kings. He clarified that it was about the 4th Imperial Guard Division, a force composed of the 2nd and 3rd sons of nobility under the command of Duke Regal Camp. The Duke, father of the second queen and the Prime Minister, covered the raid with noble rhetoric about serving the country, but everyone saw it was just a transparent power scheme. Despite the political consequences and inevitable dissatisfaction within the factions, he noted that the Duke would most likely keep his position, shifting the blame onto others, even if the disaster forced him to keep quiet for a while. He sat at the table and listened intently as his companion told how the fate of the scoundrels who tried to use the sacred labyrinth for their own greed turned out comforting. But ultimately they ran into the dungeon lord himself. The story continued. The monster escaped from the 10th floor, growing stronger every moment, overcoming formidable enemies and gaining unprecedented abilities. It pushed deeper into the lower levels, step by step undermining and defeating every boss that stood in its way. Eventually it conquered Metal Dragon, securing its place as the undisputed ruler of the 100th floor, a reign that had gone unquestioned for 10 years. He reasoned that the creature behaved more like a warrior than a monster. It had a strange restraint. It chose to strike only those who dared to challenge it. The conversation shifted to the dual nature of the creature. He explained that his master believed those who survived great hardships were destined for prosperity, like that beast who had essentially become a merchant. The city flourished because of this: merchants, craftsmen, and boldly stubborn adventurers seeking fame and fortune in the wave of influence of the great labyrinth were drawn there. He listened silently, feeling that the master's words held a deeper truth. True wealth is not just gold, but the prosperity that comes to those who walk the path of the labyrinth. The young traveler, still dazed from the previous meeting, rejects the idea of drinking and insists on celebrating their king's victories in the labyrinth. His companion quickly reproaches him. insisting that such behavior is completely unacceptable, but he remains indifferent as if it should be normal. A woman intervenes and begins scolding them for the southern sloth, ordering them to return to work immediately, and one of the men apologizes saying he only needs a short nap. He sighs and slowly drifts into a light doze, while his companion, worried, does not take his eyes off him. The conversation turns to the nature of the Minotaur. The older man says that if it is truly a warrior, it may be waiting for a worthy opponent. The monster itself seems to anticipate this. In silence and primal hunger, it waits for the day when a hero will appear and challenge it to an honest duel. They discuss the defeats of past contenders, recalling that even such strong figures as Hazel, who led elite parties, could not overcome this creature. Despite the grim history, they still cling to a spark of hope, whether something like the heavenly sword might one day rise to accomplish the impossible. He listened attentively as the conversation shifted to the Mercilius family, primarily to the young knight, whose recent exploits had already become the talk of the entire guild. The mention of the hero stirred doubt in him silently. A question moved in his mind about what this title truly conceals. Far from the Shatter Guild, the luxurious estate of the Mercilius family stood unwaveringly in the very royal city of Ridafara. At the estate, a strong hand fell on Panji's shoulder, gesturing so as to cool his noticeable anxiety. The former guild leader noticed the tension. It seemed his resignation had turned him into a mere guest in this house, and yet he still asked why his comrades were so flustered. Sitting with composed authority, Julia Sama suggested that perhaps it was time for them to master the art of keeping calm. The heavy doors opened, and the messenger announced his arrival with a ringing, thunderous voice, and the air seemed to change. He stood before the assembly, confirming that the royal orders had indeed been received, and drew the attention of all present to this fact. He was given a single, terrible command to storm the labyrinth alone and completely defeat the Minotaur from Sazerdin. This trial grew out of the unstable political climate surrounding the nomination of the next heir to the throne of the Kingdom of Valdemost. The Imperial Council initially supported the first prince, but Duke Riga, the prime minister, pushed through the second, and a deep rift opened in the succession. Being the young head of the Mercilius family, Julius gained significant support among the junior nobility, challenging the traditional views of the elders who were wary of his influence. Tension burst during the Imperial Council meeting when the Duke made a bold, unexpected statement. He claimed that anyone capable of single-handedly defeating the monster that destroyed the 4th Imperial Guard Division deserves the title of hero since the founding. The king was visibly stunned by the proposal, feeling the full weight of the Duke's words. The Duke proposed, if the young traveler can defeat the Minotaur, he will be honored as the 25th Guardian Knight of the Kingdom for a millennium. He stands at the very center of the political storm, where his potential success as a Guardian Knight will elevate the Mercilius family and pave the way for the first prince to the throne. But the king refuses to delay the succession, and this move directly hits the interests of Duke Riga. Ultimately, the date of the conquest is set for the Harvest Festival, so that public attention is diverted from the deadly task assigned to him. In the corridors of power, questions arise about the witnesses of these hearings, in particular, about the role of Everett Rovalsama. Doubts fall on the possibility of a conspiracy. After all, it was always known. He is a man of virtue and a trusted advisor to the king, so it is unlikely he would engage in the schemes of the Riga family. The burden of this trial becomes clear as soon as the harsh conditions are revealed. He is strictly forbidden from bringing food or healing items into the fight. The attendees immediately conclude, these are not just difficult conditions, this is a deliberate attempt to cause his failure through exhaustion and deprivation. When the tension reaches its limit, news arrives of an enemy offensive. Troops bearing the flags of Baron Paolo and Lord Boromidal, together with the family of Duke Riga, are heading straight for the estate. She observes the unfolding political betrayal and notices how the Riga family is preparing to break the fierce and merciless line, force a renunciation, and under the cover of national duty, see a throne for the second prince. Because of this, her companion explains, Panzel was sent into the labyrinth under impossible conditions so that he would not return, as he is still the main obstacle to their ambitions. She remains steadfast in her faith and declares that he is her sword, and that he will undoubtedly emerge victorious. The warrior beside her clenches his fist. His face darkens as he admits that he has been quietly monitoring the situation, but the news of this recklessness finally compelled him to act. He looks ahead with a grim, predatory smile, swearing that the Riga family will soon understand the true depth of the wrath he has unleashed and crushed. She turns to her allies and in a steady voice orders them to prepare for the impending clash. In response, the gathered forces roar their affirmation, ready to march under her command. Meanwhile, far from the political turmoil in the darkness, a huge silent avalanche of gold coins lies peacefully, undisturbed. She stands amid the endless glittering crowd of gold, and a bronze boot presses into the cold coins. Lowering her gaze, she pauses on the flow of time, acknowledging the one she seeks may have long forgotten about her. The surface of the bracelet she received 17 years ago, a gift that allowed her to heal her mother and later meet the person she now serves. She decides to end an old debt. She declares that she will fight with her own strength, and the royal soldier steps forward to take on the duty of submission. The blade is drawn from its sheath, its edge glows with a faint magical echo, and the clash begins. She offers King Elaborate a final, solemn invitation, looking straight and resolute. A giant beast rises from the rubble. Its heavy axe is ready as they stand face to face in the empty chamber. The air thickens with tension as two titans prepare to clash, and from this moment their final slaughter begins. The heavy door to the 100th floor of the southern labyrinth finally yields, revealing the boss chamber hidden behind it. A massive dark blade cuts through the gloom, its edge polished to deadly sharpness. In response, a brilliant ethereal sword flashes, a dazzling sacred glow cuts through the darkness. The Minotaur stands among the ruins of fallen adventurers. Its bulky figure radiates oppressive primal power. He stands ready. The burning blade is firmly held in his hand as he faces the Guardian of the Depths for the first time. The beast senses the strength of its opponent, and the warrior reads the incredible, oppressive presence of the monster. With a poignant, gloomy certainty, he understands. This creature is possibly the strongest enemy he has ever had to face. The monster's gaze narrows. A predatory anticipation flares as he acknowledges that a long time has passed since he last felt such excitement. He shifted his weight, a heavy dull thud of hooves echoed on the stone floor as he prepared to launch an attack. And the young traveler stood still, his boots firmly planted in the ground, bracing for the strike. The beast loomed, a mountain of muscle and rage, looking down at the small adventurer, who gripped his blade with unwavering focus. An experienced warrior watched from the side. The Minotaur already had a clear advantage. Speaking Russian now would mean suicide, yet he still wondered, could the boy squeeze out even a glimmer of hope in such hopelessness? Their eyes locked, one flared with primal hunger, the other shot with cold, calculated intent. Suddenly the ground shook. The monster lunged forward and in moments closed the distance with terrifying speed. He dashed aside, barely avoiding a devastating blow that cleaved the stone where he had stood just moments before. The veteran gasped in disbelief. He realized the boy not only anticipated the move, but perfectly adjusted his rhythm to the beast's zone. When the monster's guard faltered for a moment, the traveler struck with a gaze cold and precise, and seizing the opening, forced the giant to acknowledge his speed. He pressed his blade against the beast's weapon, feeling the colossal weight behind the Minotaur's strike. Sparks flew from the impact. Two forces clashed with deafening intensity. With a smooth movement, he turned around and barely slipped away from the next strike. The blade sliced the air where he had stood a moment ago. He marveled at the creature's speed and realized that the monster used the momentum of its own attack to turn, get into position, and aim at his neck. From the side, the observers froze and gasped, stunned that the beast could react to his movements with such terrifying precision. They shouted his name in alarm, their voices cutting through the tension as he fully focused on the looming threat. He ducked under the wide axe swing. The blade whistled a few inches above his head and prepared to respond with a strike. The Minotaur narrowed his eyes. He recognized that his opponent had left all defense behind and instead threw himself with everything into one desperate blow. He lunged forward sharply, and the blade fell down in a desperate arc directly onto the beast, who met the strike with a heavy, calloused hand. Steel struck the Minotaur's guard with a dull, wildly loud blow. A whole swarm of sparks flared, and the force of the collision nearly shattered the traveler's resolve. In a moment, a storm of sharp, brutal strikes. The air thickened with sound as metal cut through skin and bone. Standing amid the chaos, he suddenly was filled with realization this was exactly the opponent he had been searching for all along. His senses sharpened to a blade. He felt a surge of electric heat spreading through his veins, and his body and spirit united in complete, unwavering conviction. The beast looked back in response, lonely, piercing, and in it reflected the same primal recognition. It was him. He smiles, holding the blade steady while acknowledging, this clash is exactly what he has longed for. With a sharp burst of speed, he retreats, creating distance to prepare for the final decisive exchange. He suddenly lunges forward. The blade cuts into the monster's defense with a dazzling flash of steel. Moment by moment, he is carried forward through a barrage of strikes, every move calculated to bypass the Minotaur's guard. His eyes fixed on his opponent, and suddenly he realized the single goal that drove him. He became strong for only one reason: to put an end to this creature's life. The monster's clenched jaw snaps with tension. A primal growl cuts through the air as it prepares to respond with a strike. In response, he parries the furious blow of the massive axe. The clash sends sparks flying into the dark abyss of the labyrinth. The Minotaur snaps its jaws, nearly hitting him, and at that moment he turns to avoid the deadly blow that was meant to crush him. A blast of heat bursts from the beast's maw, forcing him to retreat while the spectators understand. The destructive effect lasts only a moment. He stands like a pillar, blade raised, as two fighters lock eyes in the final, quiet confrontation. He suddenly lunged forward, and the blade fell in a desperate, single strike against the giant creature. The Minotaur watched coldly and intently, gripping its weapon as it prepared to unleash a technique honed precisely for this moment. With a sharp, flowing movement, he began to rotate his gigantic body and a swirling vortex of raw power arose. The very air seemed to twist around the rotational force, aligning a perfect deadly circle of energy. Over the years, the beast obsessively held on to this single motor exercise, spinning in his mind the masterful technique of his mentor, until it became his own. He remembered the legendary fencer, Percival, whose blade once traced that same beautiful, devastating arc in the duel that defined his path. Striving to reproduce that perfection, the Minotaur devoted his entire existence to mastering the art of the circle. He finally achieved it, a technique that could draw circles in every dimension, pulling opponents into a vortex of irresistible power. He focused his gaze, the pupil dilated, as he prepared to unleash his final strike. With a sharp jerk, he lunged forward, his blade inscribed a perfect deadly arc in the air. The instructor gestures calmly but forcefully, explaining that the technique is essentially rotation. He explains this rotation creates effective acceleration, so the force can be directed straight into the blade. With a sharp movement, he shows how the technique creates a vortex effect and how it can unleash a continuous barrage of strikes, leaving no chance for survival. The student listens attentively while the master notes. This was precisely the style used by Lord Percival and the technique he considers the pinnacle of fencing. He laughs loudly, noting the amazing similarity between the sword and the fist despite their obvious difference. The demonstration suddenly plunges into pain. The student finds himself pressed to the spot, groaning under the pressure of the master's grip. He comprehends the lesson, understanding. The source of all power is in the rotation, in the strike capable of piercing the very heavens. The teacher concludes, revealing, even Lord Percival mastered this. He says that such a strike is impossible to stop or avoid even for the most experienced warriors. He understood the final lesson: the strike must be absolute, the only movement that leaves no chance of survival. Taking a sharp breath, he tensed, his eyes widened as the weight of the technique settled into his muscles. Opposite him, the beast curled into a ball, the giant body blurred as it prepared to unleash its own primal power. He swung the blade, the steel sang in the air. He declared that resistance was futile. This sword would not stop until it greeted its target. Focusing all his intent within himself, he dug his feet into the ground and spun with such speed that even his heavy armor could not keep up. The blade traced a perfectly deadly arc, piercing the space exactly between them. The beast jerked back, eyes wide open. Suddenly realization came, and the strike's trajectory became clear. He completed the spin, a circular force emerged as a ring of pure, invincible impulse that overwhelmed his opponent. He gritted his teeth, feeling the colossal pressure of the furious attack of the creature that was bearing down on him. With a sharp, smooth motion, he twisted the blade, and a flickering steel whirlwind flared around his body. The Minotaur lunged forward, but the spinning sweep of the sword intercepted the strike, forcing the creature to recoil from the unexpected shock. He maintained the tempo. The blade carved a perfect, inevitable circle in the air. His gaze was fixed firmly on the opponent, cold, deliberate as he prepared for the next phase of the clash. An onlooker froze in amazement, unable to comprehend the incredible power of the technique unfolding right before him. The onlooker realized with horror. The Minotaur's strike was designed so that it could neither be blocked nor evaded. But he responded, perfectly repeating the same curve to neutralize the threat. He understood the truth. His blade moved a fraction of a second faster than the Minotaur's, and the beast's weapon was forced to deviate, almost going astray. His eyes widened in shock, and the realization of his own vulnerability momentarily paralyzed him. The clash between them resembled not a fight for survival, but a duel of two blade masters. He watched, stunned, as the technique he had worked on for years shattered with terrible ease. Beneath them, the earth trembled, the very air vibrated from the furious rage of the beast, which was growing. A rage-filled smile stretched across the Minotaur's muzzle, and his eyes flashed with a new, freshly found dark passion. He was considering the next move, understanding that one technique alone was not enough to defeat such a formidable opponent. With a sharp breath, he prepared to close the distance. His boots clinked on the stone as he swung his neck for a strike. He firmly plants his feet, grips the blade with renewed determination, while the ground shakes beneath his feet. His eyes narrow, he fixes his gaze on the opponent, and that look burns with unwavering focus. Opposite him, the beast reveals a jagged, predatory smile, as if already anticipating the final clash. The monster shifts its weight, presses its heels into the ground, and prepares to unleash everything it has. It decides to abandon all techniques and abilities, pouring its very essence into one single devastating blow. A growl from within forces the creature to grip its heavy weapon tighter, the knuckles whiten from tension. She raises the axe high above her head. One strike. I recorded the blow as a killing blow, breathing heavily in the scorching air. The observer from the side looked once more and felt how heavy the moment was. The beast matched the high combat level of the young traveler, making it clear there would be a clash of absolute forces. He calculated the odds and understood. As long as the beast wins in speed and strength, direct confrontation is his only path to victory. The young traveler clenched his will into a fist. He focused to the limit when he decided to face the monster face to face. He took a low defensive stance, holding the blade at the ready to intercept the inevitable barrage of strikes. With a burst of determination, he activated his skills, pumped strength into his muscles to speed up movements and sharpen the strike. His eyes narrow at the reflected cold, unwavering resolve as the moment of impact approached. Opposite him, the Minotaur roared, raising his massive axes high to deliver a devastating blow. The beast unleashed its hidden ability as a burst of raw, destructive power meant to shatter any defense. Their gazes locked on each other. Two titans stood frozen on the edge of the final world-changing clash. The beast lunged forward, its giant form a blurred flash of wild power, while the traveler froze in defense. The sword held steady to meet the strike. They collided in a whirlwind of motion, their weapons drawing wide, deadly arcs in the air. He turned with precise accuracy, blade tracing a perfect circle, preparing to deflect the incoming strike. The Minotaur swung his heavy axe with crushing force, aiming to smash the opponent's defense. Steel met steel in a dazzling flash of light. The blow sent shockwaves through the surrounding area. He realizes that his maneuver worked perfectly, and with grim satisfaction notes, the opponent fell right into his trap. When the enemy's weapon is locked tight, he presses the advantage, declaring that this very moment will be the end of his enemy. The blade cracks under colossal pressure, and he freezes in shock as he suddenly understands. His adversary knows how to destroy weapons. In horror, he watched as his blade shattered into fragments. The metal could not withstand the colossal force of the beast strike. When the weapon shattered into fragments, the monster lunged forward, its gigantic body closed the distance in a blurred flash of deadly intent.